Good morning. Good morning.
Welcome to the Frantz competition.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ready to go. Go ahead and state your appearances for the record.
Good morning, Your Honor. Pretender man for Plaintiff Dr. Joe Rubin.
Good morning.
Good morning. Kara Anderson for the defendant, Taylor Bricker.
Good morning. Now, I'm uncertain as to how we are proceeding with opens and closes and who's doing what. So, is somebody prepared to open? Are we doing opens or closes or what?
I think we're going to start with direct.
Okay, let's start with the direct then.
Okay. Plaintiff calls Miss Leach to the stand.
Do we have a witness?
Good morning, Miss Leach.
Good morning.
We'll start with a little bit about your background this morning. Can you please tell the jury about your educational and work background?
Sure. I went to Pacifica State University where I majored in criminology, and ultimately I wound up getting a job with the McGeorge Police Department.
And how long did you work for the McGeorge Police Department?
I believe a total of 8 years, 6 years as a patrol officer and 2 years as a detective.
What is your current job?
Currently, I work as security for Joe Rubin and his candidacy for state senate.
How did you meet Dr. Joe Rubin?
Well, it's quite a harrowing story. I was on duty and I was searching a vehicle and I was inadvertently exposed to fentanyl when I was going through some marijuana that we found in the vehicle. And I don't know, my body just went into cardiac arrest. They rushed me to the hospital and Dr. Joe Rubin saved my life.
Why did you decide to leave your job of 8 years at the McGeorge Police Department to work for Dr. Joe Rubin?
Well, a few reasons. One of them was I was kind of tired of being in the police department, honestly. That experience had just really opened my eyes to all of the dangers. I was a little nervous. And also, I really liked and believed in Joe Rubin's anti-drug message. He wasn't running with a political party, so I just wanted to help.
Let's talk a little bit about the tweet in question. What did you see on January 8th, 2022?
Well, I remember that evening because I was going out with my wife. I checked my Twitter, and that's when I saw a tweet from Dr. Joe Rubin's account.
What did the tweet say?
It said something like, @be dizzy, can't wait to get Liddy at the club tonight, love Tay.
How did you feel about that tweet, Ms. Leach?
I was shocked. I know Liddy to mean under the influence of alcohol or drugs, and that was just not what Dr. Joe Rubin was about. And then that combined with the casual language, I assumed it was posted inadvertently.
And who is Tay, Ms. Leach?
I believe Tay to be Taylor Bricker, Dr. Joe Rubin's communications coordinator.
Let's talk a little bit about October 10th, 2022. What happened the morning of October 10th, Ms. Leach?
Well, that morning I picked up Dr. Joe Rubin to drive him to work, and he just kind of seemed like he was in a bad mood.
Did he say anything to you?
Yes, he told me to stick close by the office that morning because he was going to fire Taylor Bricker.
What happened when you and Dr. Rubin got to the office that morning?
That morning I was sitting in the main reception area, and Taylor Bricker went into Dr. Joe Rubin's office.
And what happened after that?
Well, I only saw her there for a few seconds, and then she left and went back to her own office. And then Jennifer, the campaign director, came into Taylor Bricker's office.
Did anything else happen after that at all?
Yes, Jennifer fired Taylor Bricker and had me escort her out of the building.
How did Taylor Bricker react when she was terminated that day?
Well, she seemed pretty upset. She said something like, F this guy, I'm going to make him pay.
And so let's talk a little bit about the article in question. When did you first hear about this article, Ms. Leach?
I believe it was published around the day of the election, so I want to say November 1st. I'm a subscriber to the McGeorge Times, so I received it in print.
And how did you feel about this article when you read it?
Well, all of the things that Taylor Bricker had said about Dr. Joe Rubin in the article were just lies about him using cocaine. I mean, none of it was true.
How often were you with Dr. Joe Rubin during his campaign?
Oh, I was with him all the time. It was my job to keep him safe whenever he was at work and whenever he had a campaign event.
Have you ever seen Dr. Joe Rubin doing cocaine?
No, never once.
Considering your expertise in the police department, what are the signs of cocaine use?
Well, there's a few of them, but some of the ones that come to mind are watery eyes, weight loss, high bursts of energy. Usually powder around the face is the best indicator.
Has Dr. Rubin ever shown these signs?
No. I guess he lost a little bit of weight during the campaign, but, he was working 2 jobs at the time, so I just didn't attribute it to cocaine use.
Considering your experience with Dr. Joe Rubin, do you think he has ever used cocaine?
No, not based on what I've seen.
That will be all, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any cross-examination?
No, thank you.
All right. Is the defense prepared to call a witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
So,
The defense would like to call our witness Taylor Bricker to the stand. Good morning, Ms. Bricker.
Good morning.
I'd like to start by talking about your background. Where are you from?
I'm from the city of McGeorge.
And where did you go to college?
I went to University of Pacifica.
What did you study at the University of Pacifica?
I majored in political science, summa cum laude.
After you graduated from university, what kind of work did you do?
Well, a week before graduation, I saw a bulletin post for Dr. Rubin's political campaign. They needed a communications coordinator, so I applied.
What happened when you applied?
I got an interview and I was hired.
How did you feel when you were offered this job?
I like to call myself a political junkie, so, I was both really impressed with in our society of just what side you are. Dr. Rubin didn't identify with any side and any specific party, and I also connected with his anti-drug campaign.
Why did you connect with that anti-drug campaign?
Unfortunately, my sophomore year, my roommate was addicted to cocaine, and I was one of the friends that conducted a intervention for her.
So let's talk about your work on this campaign. How did you feel about working on Dr. Rubin's campaign?
It wasn't as exciting as I thought it would be. I had to painstakingly focus on every single word. I would draft mailers for voters and manage his social media accounts.
So fast forwarding to your end of this job, when did you stop working for Dr. Rubin's campaign?
October 10th, I stopped working for him.
And why did you stop working for this campaign?
Well, I mistakenly submitted a tweet thinking it was on my personal account, and I deleted it immediately once I found out 2 hours later, and they fired me for that.
So let's talk a little bit more about that tweet. When you realized your mistake, what happened?
I texted the campaign manager right away, and I said, I'm so sorry, and they said it was all good, that we're going to have a meeting on Monday to discuss how to prevent this further.
What happened when you went to that meeting on Monday?
I got to the office a little bit early, and then I heard Dr. Rubin's voice, so I walked into his office a little bit early from the meeting at 8:15, and that's when I saw what I saw.
What did you see?
It's ingrained in my head. I saw Dr. Rubin pull out a dollar bill in this white powder, and I saw him on his mahogany desk. It seemed like he was doing cocaine.
How did you know he was using cocaine?
It reminded me my roommate did cocaine, so it was the exact image of that.
When you left that office that day and Ms. Lee fired you after you saw him in his office, what did you do when you were walking out of the building?
I said nothing. I held my head up high. I didn't want them to take any more of my dignity left.
So moving on from your time since this job, what have you been doing since you stopped working for Dr. Rubin's campaign?
I decided that, I didn't want the people of the McGeorge to be lied to like I was. So I decided to submit an op-ed to the McGeorge Times.
What did you say in this op-ed?
I said the doctor is not who you think the doctor is behind closed doors. And I basically said that we need to help Dr. Rubin with his addiction, not with voting him into the Senate.
Why did you write this op-ed?
Because the people need to know the truth that he is running an anti-drug campaign while he's himself doing cocaine and has an addiction.
Thank you, Ms. Bricker. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. May this witness be excused?
Yes.
Plaintiff prepared for a closing argument.
Yes, Your Honor.
Taylor Bricker's lies have prevented Dr. Rubin from saving lives. Being held accountable for one's mistakes is not wrong, but defaming someone's character is, and that is exactly what Taylor Bricker did. Under the state of Pacifica's defamation per se law, we needed to prove 4 elements today by preponderance, which basically just means more likely than not. 1, that these statements were made to other people besides Dr. Rubin. 2, that people reasonably understood these statements to mean that they were about Dr. Rubin. 3, that people reasonably understood these statements to mean that Dr. Rubin was doing cocaine. 4, that these statements were false. The first element we have proven to you today is that these statements were made to individuals other than Dr. Rubin, which they were, because Taylor Bricker posted these statements in an op-ed that was published in the McGeorge Times. This op-ed was subscribed to by 30% or more of the voters of McGeorge. And because this op-ed was posted in McGeorge Times for 30% or more of the voter population to read, these statements were made to individuals other than Dr. Rubin. Therefore, the first element has been met. The second and third elements we have proven to you today are that more likely than not, people reasonably understood these statements to be about Dr. Rubin, and more likely than not, people reasonably understood these statements to mean that Dr. Rubin was using cocaine. And they did, because Taylor Bricker made sure they did. She used Dr. Rubin's name 8 times in one page. She posted this op-ed in McGeorge Times, a newspaper almost 100 years old, a trustworthy and reliable source for the community. She said that Dr. Rubin was using cocaine in this op-ed. Therefore, the second and third elements have been met. That people reasonably understood these statements were about Dr. Rubin, and people reasonably understood these statements to mean that Dr. Rubin was using cocaine. The fourth and final element we have proven to you today is that these statements were false. Let's think back to when the defendant testified today and talked about the reason why she got fired. Taylor Bricker, as Dr. Rubin's communications coordinator, had one job, and that was to post appropriately on his social media. She described her job as painstakingly obsessing over every single written word and as excruciating. Even though it was excruciating, she painstakingly obsessed over every written word because she knew how important every written word was. She knew what kind of an impact it would have on the community. Yet, on October 8th, 2022, she posted a tweet that said, @BDizzy, can't wait to get litty at the club tonight. This went against everything Dr. Rubin stood for. Dr. Rubin is a respected doctor in the community. He has worked very hard to save the lives of those affected by drugs. He has built his character, his reputation in this community. And therefore, by posting this tweet, Taylor Bricker was fired. Of course she was fired. She failed to do her one job as his communications coordinator. The day she left his office on October 10th, she stated, "Fuck that guy, I am going to make him regret this." The day the election results came out on November 8th, she was waiting to hear that Dr. Rubin lost. She, in her own words, was relieved that Dr. Rubin's opponent had won, because that meant the defendant had won. She wanted revenge for being terminated, and she got it. She did not see Dr. Rubin.
That's time.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson?
Yes, Your Honor. She was concerned for the voters. Members of the jury, what we've seen today is a story we've all heard and hoped would never be true in our own lives. Standing up for what we believe in and being punished for it. My client, Taylor Bricker, was a young, accomplished political advocate. She had just graduated summa cum laude from Pacifica State University and landed her dream job in her hometown, working for Dr. Rubin on a campaign centered on an issue that she was very passionate about. After watching her college roommates struggle with cocaine addiction, Ms. Bricker finally had the chance to use her education and professional skills to further the cause of fighting the drug crisis in McGeorge and Pacifica. After a year and a half of diligent, dedicated work on Dr. Rubin's campaign, Ms. Bricker made a simple mistake regarding a tweet. When she realized her mistake, she immediately confessed and corrected it and reached out to her supervisor, Ms. Lee. Ms. Lee assured her that everything was fine. They would come to work that Monday morning and talk to Dr. Rubin, formulating a strategy for the rest of the campaign and communications plan. But when Ms. Bricker got to work that Monday morning for that meeting, she saw something that she never would have expected. It shocked her. She walked into Dr. Rubin's office and saw firsthand as he consumed cocaine. She knew all the signs from undergrad. She knew the white powder on the mahogany desk. She knew the rolled up dollar bill in his right hand. She knew the dilated pupils in his distraction. She knew what she saw, and she was alarmed for the voters. When Ms. Bricker left that office that day, she tried to talk to her supervisor, but her supervisor shut her down. So when she was fired for what she saw, Ms. Bricker held her head high and chose to be the bigger person by ultimately standing for her primary purpose, which is voter transparency and honesty in this election. So Ms. Bricker wrote an honest op-ed exposing the lies of this candidate, Dr. Joe Rubin. She told the public her story, and she told them that this man, who claims to be ready to fight the drug crises in Pacifica State Senate, could not be ready for that task to represent the voters because he himself was in a drug crisis in his personal life. Ms. Bricker did not write this op-ed out of anger for being fired. She did not do it out of revenge. This case is not about why she was fired, and in fact, this case is not about the fact that she was fired at all. This case is about why she went public telling her story for the voters, because she was concerned about the voters. Members of the jury, let me remind you that the plaintiff has the burden to show that the statements that Ms. Bricker made in her op-ed regarding Dr. Rubin's cocaine use were false. We've shown today that this is not true. Not only that, but the plaintiff also has the burden to show that Ms. Bricker herself seriously doubted the validity and accuracy of these statements when she published that honest op-ed in the McGeorge Times. Again, we've shown that this is not true. Ms. Bricker saw what she saw with her own eyes. She knew what she was seeing based on her personal experience. And ultimately, she stayed true to what she believed in being honest with the voters and sharing her story because she was concerned for the voters. For all these reasons, in the interest of justice, and ultimately in the interest of political transparency in the democratic process in Pacifica and McGeorge, we ask that you return a verdict in favor of Ms. Bricker by finding her not liable.
Thank you. Thanks for competing in this competition.
Thank you.
You were the first. So we have rounds today until 3 o'clock, at which time we will make our decision on the winners. And we'll publish that via Twin, Instagram.
It'll be emailed and it'll be on Instagram. Okay.
We might even put a hard copy. Morning. We'll call the matter of Rubin versus Bricker to order. Please state your appearances for the record.
Sarah Bridge on behalf of the defense.
Michael Coyne for the defense.
I understand that you'll both be doing direct examinations and closes today. Is that correct?
That is not
No.
correct.
Right. What will you be doing?
Both defense roles.
I'm an opener and a cross.
All right. And you're going to open and cross as well?
No, direct and close.
Okay. Well, let's start with your open, Ms. Bridge.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we are here today because a self-proclaimed political junkie put her trust in an actual junkie. The defense has to prove that Ms. Bricker knowingly spread false information. Today, you will find that Ms. Bricker did nothing but tell the truth. You're going to get the opportunity today to meet Taylor Bricker. Ms. Bricker is a lifelong resident of the city of McGeorge, a recent graduate of the University of the Pacifica, summa cum laude. She is a smart, talented, kind young woman who cares about her community. And she was excited to get her career started in politics. When she saw the opening for the communications coordinator on Dr. Rubin's campaign, she was ecstatic. She knew immediately that she had to apply. But not because it was any career in politics, but because it was for Dr. Rubin. Dr. Rubin's sole message was anti-drug. One message that was critically important to Ms. Bricker. Why was it so important to Ms. Bricker? Because Ms. Bricker had a loved one who experienced addiction. Her college roommate suffered from a cocaine addiction. An addiction that Ms. Bricker witnessed, an addiction that Ms. Bricker helped her move past, an addiction that changed Ms. Bricker's life. This message became so important to Ms. Bricker about getting drugs off the streets of the city of McGeorge, a message that she believed was shared by Dr. Rubin. Ms. Bricker will tell you that she made a mistake at work. When she made that mistake, she decided to come in and apologize to her supervisor. When she came in, she will tell you that she walked into Dr. Rubin's office and saw him engaging in the very activity he had campaigned to stop. He was doing cocaine. She saw a white substance all over her desk that she immediately recognized to be cocaine and a rolled dollar bill in his hand. She will tell you she was shocked and confused, but dismayed to see that all he said was something about the door being unlocked. She left and immediately went to her direct supervisor, Jennifer Lay, the campaign manager, to tell her what she'd happened. When she told Jennifer, she was met with a termination. Taylor was scared. She didn't know what to do. She feared she'd put her trust in the wrong candidate. So she did what any reasonable person in her shoes would have done. She told the truth, so that the city of McGeorge didn't place their trust in the wrong candidate too. The plaintiff will have you believe that Dr. Rubin lost his candidacy because Ms. Bricker knowingly spread false information. The only one who spread false information is the doctor himself. He, in his very campaign office, was engaged in the one activity he swore and campaigned upon to stop. We are here today because Ms. Bricker told the truth. And that truth, Dr. Rubin couldn't handle. So let me remind you, we're here today because a political junkie put her trust in an actual junkie. We ask that by the conclusion of this trial, you return with a decision of not liable. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Coyne, why don't we go ahead and call the defense witness out of order and have you do your direct examination next?
Okay. Good morning, Ms. Bricker.
Good morning.
I'd like to start at the beginning. When did you first meet Dr. Rubin?
I met him through applying to be his communications coordinator.
And what led you to apply for that job?
I was graduating within the week and I saw his posting on a bulletin board. As a political junkie, I really wanted to get into politics as soon as I could, and I really admired not only him not identifying as a political party, but also his anti-drug campaign.
Okay, how did that interview go?
Well, I got the job.
Let's talk about that job a little bit. What were your responsibilities for that job?
I would draft mailers for voters as well as manage Dr. Rubin's social media.
And how would you say you approached that job?
I had to painstakingly look over every single word. It was pretty boring.
Let's talk about the evening of Saturday, October the 8th.
Okay.
What happened in regards to your job and Dr. Rubin on that evening?
Unfortunately, I thought I was tweeting from my personal account, but in reality, I mistakenly tweeted from Dr. Rubin's account. But the moment I saw it, I immediately deleted it.
And what steps did you take toward accountability for that mistake?
Well, I felt horrible and guilty, so I texted the campaign manager and let her know what happened. I couldn't sleep that night until I got a response from her the next day.
And what did that response say?
She said, no big deal, it's already deleted, we're gonna meet the next day at 8:15 a.m. to discuss how to further prevent this from happening again.
Let's talk about that following Monday morning. What time did you arrive at the office?
Like around 8 a.m., I arrived pretty early.
What happened after you arrived at the office?
I heard Dr. Rubin's voice, so I walked into his office thinking I can just go into the meeting a little bit early.
What did you see when you walked into his office early?
The image is in my head, just him on his mahogany desk, what it looked like consuming cocaine.
And how did you know that this was cocaine use?
It reminded me of my roommate when I had an undergrad.
Tell me more about your roommate.
Yeah, my roommate really struggled with cocaine addiction. My friends and I, we coordinated an intervention. It got really serious.
And let's go back to Dr. Rubin's office. After you walked in on him, what did you do next?
I was shocked. I ran back to my office. I didn't know what to say. I mean, he was campaigning an anti-drug campaign, and I saw him doing cocaine. So I just went back to my office until the campaign manager walked in.
And when she walked in, what happened?
She told me it was like 360 from her text message the night before. She told me that I'm the one that's doing drugs and that I should be let go because of my tweet.
Who else did you interact with that day?
No one else that day. I held my head up high and I didn't say anything leaving the door.
In the days following that event, what actions did you take regarding your job or Dr. Rubin?
I felt like I needed to tell the voters what the truth was behind closed doors, so I submitted an op-ed to McGeorge Times.
Why did you feel the need to submit this op-ed?
I am one of the people that have suffered seeing someone that they care about struggle through cocaine addiction. And I know a lot of voters really connected with Dr. Rubin's campaign in regards to that, so I needed to tell them the truth that he was a hypocrite and he was lying to them.
Thank you very much, Ms. Berger. No further questions.
Thank you. Ms. Bridge, cross-examination.
Miss Leach, you were a police officer for the city of McGeorge, is that correct?
I was for 8 years.
Narcotics unit?
Yes.
So you're able to identify signs and symptoms of drug use, correct?
Yeah, I was trained to do that.
Cocaine use?
Yes.
Let's talk about some symptoms of cocaine use. Do cocaine users obviously, are they excitable?
They are.
Dilated pupils?
That is one of the symptoms, yes.
Talkative?
Yes.
Weight loss?
Yes, that's also another sign.
And let's talk about some of the symptoms that Dr. Rubin exhibited during the campaign. He lost weight,
He did, but I wouldn't call it a symptom of anything.
but he lost weight during the campaign.
He did.
And he was talkative and excitable.
He was campaigning for office, yeah.
Got it. You never saw Dr. Rubin use cocaine,
Never.
but you weren't with Dr. Rubin all the time, right?
I was with him probably more than anybody else.
But you weren't always with him.
No.
Let's talk about when you weren't with him. When you dropped him off at home, you weren't with him.
No, I was not.
And when he went into his office and closed the door, you weren't with him.
I couldn't see into his office, no.
So there were times when you weren't with Dr. Rubin and you didn't know what he was doing.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk about what Ms. Berger wrote in her op-ed. She said she saw Dr. Rubin doing cocaine.
Yeah, that's what she said.
It's possible that she saw Dr. Rubin using cocaine.
I guess anything is possible.
Ms. Berger went into Dr. Rubin's office at 8:05
About then?
and left seconds later.
Yeah.
In your experience, does a formal termination only take seconds?
I wouldn't really know. I've never been fired.
Does it seem likely that someone would enter an office, be formally terminated, and leave only seconds later?
Formal termination? No, I guess not.
Yeah. Ms. Berger went into the office and closed the door, correct?
She did.
And you weren't in the office.
No.
So it's possible that she saw Dr. Rubin doing cocaine.
I really don't think that he would, but like I said, anything is possible, I guess.
Let's talk about the signs of cocaine use again. You said that the surefire way to tell if an individual is using cocaine is white powder residue on their nose and mouth. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did you ever see Dr. Rubin with white powder substance on his nose and mouth?
No.
Is it possible that one could use a device to prevent a white powder substance on their nose and mouth?
I guess someone could.
You're a narcotics expert.
Yes. You can use devices to help you use cocaine, but it's hard to avoid any of the powder getting on you at all.
Could you perhaps use a rolled dollar bill?
People do use that to do cocaine, yes.
So it's possible that Dr. Rubin used a rolled dollar bill to do cocaine that prevented the white powder substance on his nose and mouth.
I don't think Dr. Rubin is the kind of person who would do cocaine.
But it's possible.
I guess so.
I want to ask you a couple of questions about your background. You almost died when you were on the police force, is that correct?
I did.
Dr. Rubin is the doctor that saved your life.
He was one of the doctors at the hospital, yeah.
You owe Dr. Rubin your life.
I do.
Now, Ms. Leach, your job is now to protect Dr. Rubin.
I work for him as private security, yes.
So your job is to protect Dr. Rubin?
Yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Coyne. Closing argument.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is not a case of a workplace friction. This is a case of a candidate's addiction. Now, this is a tragic story. It's been said that this is a story about revenge, that Taylor Bricker was just upset. But the tragedy of this story is not defamation. The tragedy of this story is that yet another one of our politicians has lied to us, is trying to cover up their mistake. Are you here to condemn a woman who stood up for herself and did the right thing? Are you here to silence a voice that risked their reputation to tell us the truth about a politician? You are here to do one thing: to determine if Taylor Bricker is liable for defamation. Critically, whether the evidence shows that more likely than not, Ms. Bricker did not see what she says she saw in that room, and whether there is clear and convincing evidence that she does not believe what she saw was cocaine use. If either of these elements cannot be proven, you must find Ms. Bricker not liable. Now let's consider the evidence we have against Ms. Bricker. We have the word of Miss Jordan Leach, a woman who Dr. Rubin rescued from near death. A woman who was so loyal to Dr. Rubin that she quit her job immediately after being asked to do so. A woman whose duty it has been for the last year and a half to protect Dr. Rubin, to keep him safe from any harm. And by the way, a woman who was not in the room when Ms. Bricker saw what she saw, who cannot testify to what happened in that room, and certainly not to Ms. Bricker's state of mind about what she believed that she saw. Are we to believe that after all that she's been through, Jordan Leach wouldn't say or do whatever she could to help protect Dr. Rubin, a man that she says she owes her life to? And let's consider the evidence for Ms. Bricker. Ms. Bricker, who is hardworking and detail-oriented. Ms. Bricker, who saved her college roommate from a cocaine addiction. This is not a woman out for revenge. Ms. Bricker has a passion for politics. She was not going to sit back and let the voters be lied to, even though that would have been the easy thing to do. In no way does the evidence show that more likely than not, Ms. Bricker did not see what she says she saw in that office. Dr. Rubin, behind his desk, rolled up bill in his hand, white powder in front of him. And it cannot be said by any stretch that there is clear and convincing evidence that Ms. Bricker does not believe what she saw was cocaine use. Because neither of these elements have been met, it should be clear that Ms. Bricker cannot be found liable for defamation. If she is found liable, that'll mean that a drug-using, lying politician is able to condemn a woman who stood up for herself, is able to silence a voice that risked its reputation to tell us the truth. Members of the jury, I respectfully request that you find Ms. Bricker not liable for defamation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both for coming out and competing today. we wrap the rounds around 3 o'clock and we will publish results. All right, we'll call the matter of Rubin versus Bricker to order. Will you please state your appearances for the record?
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Elise Bold, B-O-L-D. And this morning I'll be arguing on behalf of the plaintiff, Dr. Joe Rubin.
And will you be doing open or close?
I will be doing the opening as well as the cross-examination of Taylor Bricker.
Thank you, Ms. Bold.
Good morning, Your Honor. Yanine Ortega, O-R-T-E-G-A, for the defendant, Ms. Taylor Bricker, and I will be doing a direct exam and a closing statement.
Thank you. Ms. Bold, are you ready to proceed with your opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may.
Taylor Bricker's lies prevented Dr. Rubin from saving lives. The defendant, Taylor Bricker, had the power to paint Dr. Joe Rubin's image publicly. As his communications coordinator on his political campaign, Taylor Bricker constructed this image of him, but not the one that she was supposed to. And as a result, my client, Dr. Joe Rubin, lost the opportunity to save more lives. My client, Dr. Joe Rubin, is a prominent local doctor in the city of McGeorge. He's an experienced emergency room physician who saved the lives of many dealing with drug use. Now, with this drug crisis going on, he decided to make real change from real experience. And he decided to run for the state of Pacifica Senate because he wanted to make his voice heard. Ladies and gentlemen, my client did not have any political affiliations, but rather one single issue campaign, anti-drug messages. He wanted to fight the drug crisis going on, plaguing his community. He wanted to save it. Now, starting this candidacy, he hired Jennifer Leahy, who was the campaign manager, as well as Jordan Leach, who was his private security and his driver. Jennifer Leahy hired Taylor Bricker, the defendant, who was the communications coordinator. Her sole responsibility was to post on Dr. Rubin's social media account. Her sole responsibility was to share my client's message. But instead, she constructed her own. Directing your attention to October 8th, Taylor Bricker posted from Dr. Rubin's social media account an inappropriate, unacceptable tweet that said, "At Be Dizzy, can't wait to get litty at the club tonight. Love, Tay." We will hear later today on the stand from Jordan Leach, former narcotics detective, tell us that the term litty is slang for drug usage. It explains someone who's high, intoxicated. This goes against everything Dr. Rubin has been fighting for and his entire platform. When Taylor Bricker was addressed about her mistake by Jennifer Leahy fired her right then and there to terminate her during the course of her employment for this mistake she made. But then, Taylor Bricker didn't stop there in her image of Dr. Rubin. She took to the media once more, this time posting a defamatory article about my client, Dr. Joe Rubin. She posted in the McGeorge Times, a newspaper read by 30% of the local voters, false accusations that my client used cocaine. Now this defamed, this tarnished his image in the community that he spent most of his life serving. This was unacceptable. As such, we, the plaintiff, will prove by preponderance of the evidence the following 4 elements of defamation per se. First, that Ms. Bricker's statements were told to a person or persons other than Dr. Rubin. Second, that these people reasonably believe that these statements were about Dr. Rubin. Third, that these statements by a reasonable person were believed to mean that Dr. Rubin was using cocaine. And fourth, that these statements were false. Now, ladies and gentlemen, timing is everything. Taylor Bricker posted this tweet on October 8th. She was fired on October 10th. Less than a month later, November 1st, she posted this op-ed in McGeorge Times. Just a few days later, on November 8th, the election results were called for my client's opponent, Sarah Silver. My client had the chance of saving more lives ripped away from him because of Taylor Bricker's lies. As such, we, the plaintiff, request that after you've heard all the evidence of the trial, that you find the defendant, Taylor Bricker, liable of defamation per se. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Ortega, direct examination.
Yes. The defense calls Ms. Taylor Bricker to the stand.
Good morning. Can you go ahead and introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
Good morning. My name is Taylor Bricker.
Ms. Bricker, where do you currently reside?
I reside in the city of McGeorge.
All right, and how long have you lived there?
I've lived there all my life.
All right. Where did you go to school?
I went to school at University of the Pacifica, graduated in May of 2021.
All right, and what did you study at University of the Pacifica?
Political science, summa cum laude.
Okay. Once you graduated, were you looking for any specific type of employment?
Yes, I really wanted to get into politics, so luckily a week before I graduated, I saw a posting for Dr. Rubin's campaign.
Okay, and did you want to apply right away, or what was?
I immediately applied. I was so drawn to his anti-drug campaign as well as him not identifying to any political party. I thought that was refreshing.
Okay, tell us why you were so drawn by that anti-drug message.
I was drawn by it because of my roommate. I saw her firsthand experience her cocaine addiction, and I was one of the few friends that helped her get an intervention and help her get clean.
Okay, and now tell me a little bit about the responsibilities you had when you started working with Dr. Rubin.
I would draft mailers for the voters as well as manage the social media accounts for Dr. Rubin.
Now, let's talk about a little bit about that tweet that you posted on his account. Tell me what happened.
October 8th, I was under the impression I was tweeting from my personal account, but I actually tweeted from Dr. Rubin's account. The moment I saw it, I deleted it right away.
Okay, and did you do anything else after that?
I felt really guilty, so I communicated to the campaign manager about that tweet. I couldn't sleep that night until I got a response from her the next day.
Okay, and what did she respond?
She told me that everything was okay and it was deleted, so we would have a discussion the next day, Monday morning at 8:15 a.m., to discuss how to further prevent this from happening again.
Okay, and what did you take that to mean?
I thought, I wasn't scared that I was going to get fired. I was actually very relieved, but I, walked into that meeting thinking that it was just going to be a game plan decision, nothing critical.
All right, so let's talk about Monday morning. Monday morning came around. What did that morning look like for you?
I got there early and I heard Dr. Rubin, so I walked in a little bit early before the meeting, just to get ready for that meeting.
Okay, and you walked into the meeting. Describe for us what you saw.
It's ingrained in my head. I saw Dr. Rubin, what it looked like snorting cocaine, and I was shocked. I ran back to my office immediately.
Okay, and did you look directly at Dr. Rubin? Did you look anywhere else?
I saw his eyes. His eyes opened really, really wide. I didn't say anything to him, though, because I was so shocked.
Okay, so once you saw Dr. Rubin behind his desk, what did you do next?
I ran back to my office, and then the campaign manager came in and told me that I tried to tell her what I saw, but the campaign manager told me that I was on drugs and that I should be let go.
Okay. And after you
After the campaign manager fired you, what did you do next?
I packed up my stuff and held my head up high. I didn't want them to take any more of my dignity that they took from me.
Okay, now let's talk a little bit about you going to the McGeorge Times. What prompted you to go to the McGeorge Times?
I wanted to tell the voters the truth, that the Dr. Rubin that they thought they saw was not who they saw, or who he was behind closed doors. As someone who saw a close friend struggle with cocaine, I knew that a bunch of voters connected with that message, and I wanted to tell them the truth and how much of a hypocrite he was.
No further questions.
Thank you. Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Ms. Bricker.
Good morning.
You graduated summa cum laude from the University of Pacifica?
I did.
In fact, you got a degree in political science.
I did.
And you were really hoping to work on a political campaign after you graduated.
I was.
So you were ecstatic when you were offered this job.
I was.
Let's talk about your job. Your job was communications coordinator.
Yes.
Your sole responsibility was to post from Dr. Rubin's social media account.
One of the things, yes.
Okay. And you also state that you had to painstakingly obsess over every single word that you posted.
Yeah, it was quite boring.
And you sat behind a desk most of this time.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your words. Directing your attention to October 8th, you posted from Dr. Rubin's social media account, "At Be Dizzy, can't wait to get litty at the club tonight." Is that correct?
I did mistakenly tweet that on his account, yes.
And you felt really guilty about this.
I did.
You in fact texted Jennifer Leahy immediately.
Yeah.
She told you to meet into the office with Dr. Rubin's office at 8:15 Monday morning. Is that correct?
She did tell me that.
You arrived at 8:05.
Yeah.
You were anxious about this meeting.
I was anxious.
You arrived early in anticipation for the meeting.
Yes.
Now, let's talk about when you went inside. You saw white powder on his desk.
I did.
You did not see white powder around his face,
I looked at his eyes and the desk, so I didn't catch a glimpse of that.
but not on his face.
I didn't see anything.
Thank you. You were only in his office for a few seconds.
I was.
So within a mere few seconds, you claim you saw him snorting cocaine when there was only powder on his desk?
Yes, I saw a dollar bill in his hand as well.
Dollar bill in his hand. Now, after this incident that lasted a few seconds, you went back to your office and Jennifer Leahy came in.
She did.
She told you that the tweet you made the previous Friday was unacceptable.
Yeah, I was completely 180 from what she told me the night before.
But she told you it was unacceptable.
She did say that.
Thank you. So after she told you it was unacceptable, she fired you right there.
She did.
Now, less than a month later, you wrote an op-ed in the McGeorge Times,
Yes.
referring court and counsel to what has been established as Exhibit 1. Do you recognize this?
I do.
This is what you wrote in the McGeorge Times,
Yes.
a magazine that has been reviewed by 30% of the local voters. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And you intended for the statements that you made in this op-ed to be true.
They were true.
But you mentioned here on paragraph 7, line 2, and I'll bring it closer to you. May I approach?
You may.
Permission to approach? Paragraph 7, line 2. You said, "I lost my job because of what I saw." Did I read that correctly?
You did.
But you just mentioned that you lost your job after Jennifer Leahy told you your tweet was unacceptable.
I tried to tell her and she didn't listen, so then she fired me right then and there.
Thank you, but respectfully, I'm going to ask you my question. She fired you after she told you the tweet was unacceptable. Is that correct?
After she said that, yes.
Now, let's talk about the election results. This op-ed was posted November 1st. Is that correct?
It was.
And the results came out November 8th?
They did.
You were relieved when you found out Dr. Rubin had lost.
I was relieved.
You were waiting to hear that Dr. Rubin had lost.
Yes.
To his opponent, Sarah Silver.
Yes.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you. Is witness be excused?
Yes.
Is the defense ready to proceed with closing argument?
I am, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Members of the jury, this case is not about defamation. This case is about exposing the truth about Dr. Rubin. Now, the law requires that in order for Dr. Rubin to prove his claim against Ms. Bricker, you must find that more likely than not, the statements Ms. Bricker made to the McGeorge Times were false. Now, as you heard here today, Ms. Bricker is an upstanding member of the McGeorge community, and all she wants to do is make a difference. And that's why she wanted to work on an anti-drug campaign, because that is a campaign that spoke to her on a deeper level. You heard from Ms. Bricker here today. She saw cocaine use and abuse in her roommate, and she went and she got her roommate the help that she needed. Now, Ms. Bricker made one mistake while working with Dr. Rubin, and that one mistake cost her her job, posting a tweet on the wrong account. It's an honest mistake, and you heard it from her here today. She reported it, she took responsibility for it, she didn't lie about it, and she took it down. And when she told Jennifer about the tweet, she was assured that all was well. Everything was gonna be fine. They were gonna talk about campaign strategy on Monday morning. Her job was gonna continue as normal, but yet she was fired. Because when she walked in Monday morning to Dr. Rubin's office and saw him sitting behind his desk with a pile of cocaine and a rolled up dollar bill in his hand, dilated pupils, Ms. Bricker was not believed. Jennifer fired her instead of hearing her out. Jennifer wanted to shut Ms. Bricker down. They wanted to hide the truth about Dr. Rubin's cocaine use. Now, members of the jury, the only witness that Dr. Rubin brought to you today was Jordan Leach. And who is Jordan Leach? Jordan Leach is a man that owes Dr. Rubin his life. He told you that here today. He owes him his life because he saved his life. Now, members of the jury, what is Mr. Leach willing to do for Dr. Rubin? I don't know, maybe he's willing to lie. Maybe he's willing to cover up drug use for a man that he holds so high on a pedestal. Members of the jury, Ms. Bricker went to the McGeorge Times to tell the community who Dr. Rubin really was, because she recognized those symptoms in Dr. Rubin from her roommate, someone she cared so deeply about. Dilated pupils, talkative, overconfidence. Even Mr. Leach approved those symptoms. He's a experienced narcotic officer, and he is trying to cover those symptoms up as just a regular politician on the campaign trail. Members of the jury, that is a lie. Those are symptoms of cocaine use. Don't let his big campaign and his big personality of being a doctor fool you. He has the easiest access to cocaine. Members of the jury, this case is not about defamation. This case is about exposing the truth.
Thank you. Thank you both for competing. We'll wrap up here today at about 3 p.m. and we will publish results probably closer to 4 by email and by Instagram. Thank you. All right, calling the matter of Rubin versus Bricker to order. Parties, please state their appearances for the record.
Devin Cable on behalf of Joe Rubin for the plaintiff.
Thank you.
Good morning, Your Honor. Aaliyah Sipra, counsel for the defense.
Thank you. I understand that you'll both be doing opening statements and cross-examinations today? Is that correct? All right, is the plaintiff ready to proceed with her open?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may.
Mind is like water. When it becomes agitated, it becomes difficult to see. A mind that is agitated can also wreak havoc on itself and everything around it. Taylor Bricker's mind was so agitated that it was dangerous and caused her actions to be spiteful. And ultimately, it led to Dr. Rubin's reputation being destroyed and ending his goals of helping our very own community. Dr. Rubin is an emergency room physician, a doctor who saved the life of a police officer who encountered fentanyl in the line of duty. Dr. Rubin saw an opportunity where he could use his experience, expertise, and depth of knowledge to help this community with the severe drug crisis. Dr. Rubin announced his candidacy in April and began building his campaign staff. Dr. Rubin worked tirelessly on his campaign, all while maintaining part-time work at the hospital. Dr. Rubin put everything into what he believed in and attended approximately 50 campaign and community events. Dr. Rubin wanted to make sure his community knew of his dedication, care, and commitment. And it appeared they did. Not only did he gain widespread support, the polls a month before the election showed that he had a significant 5-point lead from his opponent. Then things took a bit of a turn, all because of this woman here. As the communications coordinator, maintaining the campaign social media accounts was one of her most important jobs, one she'd been presumably successful at for the last year and a half that she'd been on the campaign. Ms. Bricker was well aware that Dr. Rubin's campaign ran on its message of being anti-drug. Yet, 1 month before the election, she posted a pro-drug tweet onto the campaign's account and left it there for 2 hours. Dr. Rubin worked very hard on this campaign, and this tweet was on his campaign's account for everyone to see. Later, Taylor Bricker will testify that she was fired because of what she thinks she saw. But you will hear more evidence that on his way to work that morning, Dr. Rubin's driver asked him about the tweet, and Dr. Rubin let him know that he planned to fire Ms. Bricker that day. You will also hear that when Taylor Bricker was at the office, she was running on no sleep and was extremely anxious. She also was there for only a few seconds. She was fired because of the tweet. Not only will you hear she was tired and anxious, she also has no training on drug signs, symptoms, or even drug use at all. Further, Jordan Leach will testify that when she was being escorted from the office, he heard her say, "Fuck that guy. I'm gonna make him regret this." It does not even stop there. Miss Bricker went to the McGeorge Times in order to vindicate her emotions and sense of reality by weaving a distorted story that makes Dr. Rubin the bad guy. Dr. Rubin worked so hard on his campaign. And this article was published 1 week before the election. And with the McGeorge Times being the only newspaper in the state, it had 30% of voters subscribed to it and even more accessing it online. Dr. Rubin's opponent won by 10 percentage points. This was a significant lead from the 5-point lead he had the month prior. Dr. Rubin lost his opportunity to make the much-needed difference he wished to in this state. And this unfortunate outcome can fully be attributed to the alleged claims Ms. Bricker made to the newspaper and what she posted on social media. Members of the jury, at the end of this trial, I ask that you allow your minds to settle and see clearly where the evidence leads you. I urge you to listen when I ask that you find Taylor Bricker liable for defamation.
Thank you. Ms. Sipper.
Crisis, chaos, corruption. After working a painstaking day as a communications coordinator, tasked with laboring over minute details, cautious about every comma, every period, a young Taylor Bricker, a recent graduate of the University of Pacifica, eager to work in the field of politics, was about to stamp her time card. Excited to reward herself for working hard, Taylor, like many of us, decided to go to a club, to go have fun, to let loose, to be Taylor Bricker. She decided to share this enthusiasm with her friends on social media. Ready to start the night, Taylor tapped a tiny tweet button. And as a little birdie chirped, the weight of her tap came thundering down. Mortified, a paralyzed Taylor looked to the username. And where it was supposed to read Taylor Bricker, instead, it read Dr. Joe Rubin, Taylor's boss. You will hear about crisis. Taylor's like us. She's an aspiring individual, driven, dedicated, passionate about her job and her career, beaming with so much potential. She's like you and me. She's a human being. She's not without flaws. She made a mistake, an honest mistake, a small mistake. That cost her job and her reputation. You will also hear about crisis. Taylor saw the unimaginable. Taylor saw her Dr. Rubin in his office using cocaine. This is not a difficult mystery we are trying to unravel. This is not a game of Clue. This is not Mrs. Peacock in the conservatory with a candlestick. This is a man behind a mahogany desk, covered in powder. I want you to focus on the facts and the truth. Taylor had so desperately tried to run away from the impacts of drugs. She had already seen her roommate struggle with an addiction. She had already faced such crises of her own. There is no reason for her to lie about this chaos. There is no reason for her to lie. How could Taylor cope with the idea that her boss, a renowned figure in the community, someone she trusted, whose message deeply resonated with her, was in fact the monster she so hopelessly craved to run away from? Today you will also hear about corruption. You will hear from the plaintiff. They will call as their witness Mr. Jordan Leach. I urge you to focus in on Mr. Leach. Focus on Mr. Leach's connection with Dr. Rubin. Mr. Leach was not there when Taylor walked into Rubin's office. Mr. Leach did not see what Bricker saw. Mr. Leach did not hear the conversation between Rubin and Bricker. But Mr. Leach owes everything to Dr. Rubin. Because Dr. Rubin saved his life. I want you to focus on Taylor. I want you to focus on the truth. At the end of this trial, my co-counsel will come before you and ask that you find Taylor not liable.
Thank you. Although we probably typically proceed with defense cross first, I think I'm going to call the witnesses out of order so that you can have a little break. So, Ms. Cable, do you want to proceed with your cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor.
Let's begin with your position on the campaign. You were the communications coordinator.
Yes.
You worked in this position for 1.5 years.
Yes.
You worked alone.
I did.
Dr. Rubin was out of the office frequently.
Yeah, he was.
You and Dr. Rubin did not work one-on-one.
No, we didn't.
You partly took the job because you resonated on a personal level with the anti-drug message.
Yes.
You had a roommate who used cocaine.
Unfortunately, yes.
You lived with them,
Yes.
was around them often.
Yes.
The drug use became so bad that you held an intervention.
I did.
You were highly sensitive to the signs of drug use in your roommate.
Yes.
Moving on to the day you were let go. You saw Dr. Rubin in his office
I did.
with white powder on the desk
Yes.
and a bill rolled up in his right hand.
That's true.
But you have no formal education on drug use.
Just from what I've seen personally.
Okay, so no education on signs,
No.
symptoms.
No.
Your only awareness comes from the relationship you had with your roommate.
Yes.
Moving to the election. You waited for the results to be called.
I did.
You hoped that Dr. Rubin lost.
I did.
You, in fact, were relieved.
I was.
And just jumping back to that time you were in the office, you were only there for a few seconds.
When I saw him?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And you were running on no sleep.
I couldn't sleep the day prior. No, I couldn't.
And you were anxious.
I was.
And you were in shock.
When I saw him, yes, I was.
And let's talk about the tweet.
Okay.
You posted, "At Be Dizzy. Can't wait to get litty at the club tonight. Love, Tay."
I did tweet that.
You posted that on October 8th.
I did.
One of your main jobs is maintaining the campaign's social media account.
It is.
And you have access to the campaign account on your personal device.
Yes.
And you've had the campaign account on your personal device for the 1.5 years you've been at the position.
I have.
You've had no issues up until this point.
Yeah, no, it was an accident.
So you posted a personal tweet about getting lit
Yes, I did.
onto the campaign account
Yes.
for 2 hours.
Yeah, once I realized it was there, I immediately deleted it.
So it was up there for 2 hours.
It was.
A personal tweet
Yes.
on the campaign account.
Yes.
No further questions.
Thank you. Sit down.
Good morning, Mr. Leach.
Good morning.
Let's start with your background.
All right.
You were a patrol officer, is that correct?
was.
And you were a detective?
Yes,
In November of 2020, you went into cardiac arrest, is that right?
I did.
And Dr. Rubin treated you?
He did.
So Dr. Rubin saved your life.
Yeah, he was one of the doctors that did.
Dr. Rubin offered you a job?
He did.
So you work full-time for Dr. Rubin, is that right?
Yeah, as his private security.
Okay. So your sole employment is from Dr. Rubin.
Yes.
And your sole income is also from Dr. Rubin.
Yes.
And just to clarify, as both a driver and a security guard?
Yes.
And when you were in the narcotics department, did you have training on drug use?
I did.
So you yourself were also exposed to fentanyl, is that right?
Yeah, it was during a traffic stop. I was searching the car and was exposed to fentanyl in the process.
Okay. And in your affidavit, you state that you truly owe your life to Dr. Rubin, is that right?
Yes.
So you would be willing to do just about anything for this man?
No.
No?
No limits.
So when you stated that he saved your life, what did that mean?
Just that he was one of the doctors that treated me and saved my life.
Okay. So let's talk about Dr. Rubin. He runs an anti-drug campaign, is that right?
He does.
And you accompany him at campaign events?
I do.
But you don't accompany him for personal matters, do you?
No.
So you're not with Dr. Rubin at all times?
Not at all times, no.
So you don't see the Dr. Rubin behind closed doors, do you?
No.
No. Okay. Let's talk about the signs that you saw but inevitably missed. You know that Dr. Rubin is very talkative?
He is.
And you know that he also lost quite a bit of weight during this campaign?
Yeah, it seemed pretty stressful.
Okay. And you know that mood swings are a sign of drug use?
They are.
And you know that Dr. Rubin is a full-time doctor?
I think he's working part-time during the campaign, but he was a full-time doctor before.
So he's still a doctor and he's working in his campaign, is that right?
Yes.
And you know that he was only ahead of his opponent a couple of points?
He was ahead 5 points?
Yeah, so just a couple of points, right?
I would say it's more than a couple, but...
So wouldn't you say that that's enough to put any rational man over the edge?
No.
That's not enough? That he's working full-time as a doctor, he's campaigning, and he was only ahead a couple of points?
I think he had a pretty good lead going in.
Okay, moving on. Let's talk about the incident. The morning after the tweet, you drove Dr. Rubin to the office?
I did.
And you saw that he was visibly upset?
He was.
And does Dr. Rubin's door remain closed at all times?
Not at all times, no.
But when somebody's having a conversation with him, somebody goes to meet him, his door remains closed?
If it's a private conversation, yeah.
So when Bricker walked in that morning, you wouldn't be able to hear the conversation between Rubin and Bricker, would you?
Oh, no.
No. You didn't see what Bricker saw inside that office, did you?
No.
No. So let's talk about Bricker. You see that she's very dedicated to her job, is that right?
She seemed like it, yeah.
She cares about her work?
From what I saw, yeah.
She cares about Dr. Rubin's campaign message, is that right?
From what I saw, yes.
So you've never seen her make any mistake, absent that one tweet, have you?
Besides her tweeting that message on his account, no.
No further questions.
Thank you. Congratulations on competing. Excellent round. We'll finish up here around 3 p.m. and we will publish the results. You'll get an email. All right, call on the matter of Rubin versus Bricker to order. Please state your appearances for the record.
Tara Caffro, counsel for the plaintiff.
Good morning, Ms. Caffro.
Good morning, Your Honor. Miguel Romero, here on behalf of my client, Taylor Bricker.
Good morning. I understand that you are each doing an opening statement and a cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
We'll do the opening statements as typical, but we'll take the cross-examinations out of order so that you guys have a little break in between your performances. Are you ready to proceed with your opening, Ms. Caffro?
Yes, Your Honor.
You bet.
Actions speak louder than our words. The things that we do in our lives can be a greater reflection of our character than the things that we say or the things that others say about us. Meet the plaintiff, Joe Rubin. Dr. Joe Rubin. Dr. Rubin has saved countless lives as an emergency room doctor, including the life of a police officer, and plans to run on an anti-drug campaign. Dr. Rubin has seen the horrors in the hospitals, including the deadly effects of drugs in the United States, and he plans to run for Pacifica State Senate. Dr. Rubin plans to run on a single-issue, nonpartisan campaign to address these horrors, so much so that he is focused on this campaign. Dr. Rubin was in the lead. He had gained the support of his community. He was ahead of his only competitor. He was projected to win. Then, November 1st came, and he lost. 7 days before the election, the defendant, Taylor Bricker, posted an op-ed article entitled, "The Good Doctor is Not Who You Think." In this op-ed, Ms. Bricker accuses Dr. Rubin not only of doing cocaine, but of battling an addiction. 7 days after she was fired, and 7 days before the election. Members of the jury, I ask you as the plaintiff that we are suing the defendant, Ms. Bricker, Ms. Taylor Bricker, for defamation per se. The elements of defamation per se are as follows: that the defendant made one or more statements about Dr. Rubin, that the defendant made those statements to other persons who reasonably understood those statements to be about Dr. Rubin, that those persons reasonably understood that those statements meant that Dr. Rubin was doing cocaine, that those statements were false, and the defendant knew that those statements were false. But let me take you back to the beginning. Dr. Rubin was in the community. He went to over 50 community events, ensuring that his message was out for followers. Not only was he in the lead of his only competitor, but he was focusing on this single issue campaign. Dr. Rubin hired Officer Leach. Officer Leach is going to come before you today, and he is going to testify that he was with Dr. Rubin the entirety of his campaign, and he never once saw him use cocaine. Moreover, Dr. Rubin hired the defendant, Ms. Taylor Bricker, to be his communications coordinator. Ms. Bricker was supposed to be Dr. Rubin's communication coordinator. Her primary responsibilities included crafting his voter pamphlets and posting on his social media. Ms. Bricker posted a tweet on Dr. Rubin's professional account, which said, "At Be Dizzy, can't wait to get litty at the club. Love, Tay." Someone whose sole responsibility was to look over every single word posted this tweet so carelessly. Members of the jury, my co-counsel will come before you today, and we will ask you to remember that Dr. Rubin's actions do not align with Ms. Bricker's words, because actions speak louder than our words. Members of the jury, the burden of proof in a civil case is a preponderance of evidence. If you feel that more likely than not that the defendant was lying in making these statements against Dr. Rubin, you must return a verdict of liable. A preponderance of evidence means if the scales tip slightly towards the defendant is lying, you must return a verdict of liable.
Thank you. Mr. Romero.
The taker, a Hippocratic oath, was a hypocrite. When Dr. Joe Rubin was sworn in, he took an oath to do no harm. Today, the evidence will show that Dr. Rubin broke his oath by misleading his potential voters. Members of the jury, we will hear how Dr. Rubin launched a campaign, positioning himself as the only anti-drug candidate. While Dr. Rubin used this slogan, Dr. Rubin was using cocaine. Dr. Rubin's platform was one that our community could get behind, but that platform was a lie. Today, we will present evidence that shows that Taylor Bricker, on October 10, 2022, saw Dr. Rubin using cocaine. We will, as you heard from the plaintiff, in order to prove my client liable for the statements in the McGeorge time, they must prove 4 elements. But make no mistake, the only element that's relevant tonight is number 4, that these statements were false. That is all that is in contention tonight. And they will fail to meet this burden of proof. At its essence, this case boils down to one very simple question. Did Taylor Bricker make false statements? In order to do this, the plaintiff must prove by clear and convincing evidence that Taylor Bricker made statements that she knew were false or which she had serious doubts about their truth. The plaintiff will fail to meet their burden of proof. The only witness the plaintiff will provide will be shown to be biased towards Dr. Rubin. The plaintiff will fail to meet their burden of proof. Today, we will show that Taylor Bricker saw Dr. Rubin using cocaine, and on November 1st, she exposed the hypocrisy of Dr. Rubin to the voters. But in order to fully understand this case, we need to take a step back and review the evidence, piece by piece. We'll start with the employment of Taylor Bricker. Ms. Bricker will take this stand and explain how, like many others in our community, she was enthralled by the message that the plaintiff was running on, how she had been impacted by the epidemic of drug abuse that plagued our country, how when she was in college, her roommate developed an addiction, and how she was able to get her roommate into a rehab facility, saving their lives. When Taylor Bricker saw a posting for a job opportunity with Joe Rubin, she believed this was her chance to help others as she had helped her roommate. She applied and was given the position as communications coordinator. On October 8, 2022, Ms. Bricker accidentally posted a tweet on the campaign Twitter account that she intended to post on her private account. Upon realizing this mistake, she immediately took the post down and messaged campaign manager Jennifer Lee. Ms. Lee did not respond until the next morning when she said, "Okay, what's done is done, and it's deleted now." Dr. Rubin would like to discuss communication strategy with you in his office Monday at 8:15. That Monday, October 10, 2022, Ms. Bricker decided to head to the meeting a few minutes early. As she walked to the doctor's office, she was met with a closed door. Ms. Bricker knocked and began to turn that doorknob. And as she opened that door, she saw an image that is etched in her mind. Dr. Joe Rubin, the anti-drug candidate, behind his mahogany desk, rolled bill in his right hand, pupils dilated with white powder all over that desk. Ms. Bricker immediately recognized that white powder for what it was, cocaine. She was transported and reminded of the addiction her college roommate suffered. Shortly after, Ms. Bricker was terminated from her position for seeing this truth, but she still decided to let the voters know about the hypocrisy of Dr. Joe Rubin. She wrote the article in the McGeorge Times to inform voters of the behind closed doors Dr. Rubin. In closing, I remind you that in order to prove my client liable for defamation, the plaintiff must prove by clear and convincing evidence that Ms. Bricker knowingly posted false statements or statements that she had serious doubts to their truth. The plaintiff will fail to meet this burden of proof. At the end of this trial, my co-counsel will rise and remind you that the only thing Taylor Bricker wrote was what she saw and what she believed to be true. My co-counsel will ask that as you go to that jury deliberation room, and you get your verdict form, that you do the only reasonable thing and mark not liable. Thank you.
Thank you. Ready to proceed? Ms. Kappa, cross-examination.
Thank you for being here, Miss Bricker.
Sure.
You went to Pacifica State Senate, Pacifica State College.
Yes, that's correct.
You majored in political science.
I did.
Summa cum laude?
Yes.
And you classified yourself as a political junkie.
Yes, definitely.
You decided to work for Dr. Rubin.
Yes.
You applied.
I did.
You were hired.
Yes.
And this was your first job post-grad.
Yes, it was.
Let's talk about this job.
Okay.
You were hired to be Dr. Rubin's communication coordinator.
Yes.
You were tasked with crafting his voter pamphlets and posting on his social media.
I was, yes.
You were familiar with Twitter.
Yes.
You posted on Dr. Rubin's Twitter.
I did, yes.
You also had your own personal Twitter.
That's true.
I'd like to talk about the night of October 8th, 2022.
Okay.
You posted a tweet on Dr. Rubin's professional Twitter account.
Yes, completely by mistake.
And in that tweet, it read, "At Be Dizzy, going to get Liddy at the club tonight. Love, Tay."
Yes, that's what it said.
And you go by Tay routinely. For Taylor Bricker.
It's a nickname, yes.
You posted that at 7:00 p.m., correct?
I did.
You did not take it down until 9 p.m.
Regrettably, no, I didn't realize it until then.
Miss Bricker, did you go to the club that night?
I was back by 9. You know, I'm not really sure.
But you did not take that down for 2 hours.
That's correct.
Miss Bricker, you were anxious.
Yeah, I was anxious to go into work on Monday.
You were tired?
Yes, I hadn't slept well.
You were worried that you might get in trouble.
I was worried, yes.
Although you had consulted Miss Lee, you were still worried that you would get in trouble.
I was worried, yes.
Even though she told you everything would be okay.
Yes.
I'd like to talk about that morning, October 10th, 2022.
Okay.
You walked into your office.
Yes.
At around 8:05 p.m.
Yes.
You had a meeting with Dr. Rubin.
Yes.
You walked into his office.
Yes.
You were only in there for about 1 to 2 seconds.
Yes, it was a very brief encounter.
You did nothing.
I walked back to my office.
You said nothing.
I couldn't find the words.
To anyone.
You know, I tried to tell Jennifer, but she wouldn't let me finish.
Once you were in your office, you were in there for about 25 minutes.
That sounds about right.
And then you were let go.
Yes.
Officer Leach escorted you out of the building.
He did.
When you left, you said something.
No, I didn't say anything.
You were feeling a little bit of anger once you left the office.
I mean, I was upset. I didn't think I should have been let go, and yeah, I was mad about it.
Maybe a little bit betrayed?
Sure, yeah.
So you wrote an op-ed article about it.
Yes, the people needed to know what Dr. Rubin was really like.
Let's talk about that op-ed article, Miss Bricker. You posted an op-ed article in the McGeorge Times.
Yes.
The only newspaper in the city of McGeorge.
Yes.
And in that article, you accused Dr. Rubin of doing cocaine.
Yes.
Battling a cocaine addiction.
Yes.
Even though you only saw him do cocaine once.
Yes.
In the span of 1 to 2 seconds.
That's correct. That's how long our encounter was.
When you were anxious.
Yes.
Tired.
Yes.
Even worried.
Yes.
About losing your job.
Yes, I was worried.
The same day that you were fired.
Yes.
You allegedly saw Dr. Rubin do cocaine.
I saw him, yes.
You posted this article written by you.
Yes.
You looked through every word of it.
Yes, it was my own writing.
And you posted this after you were fired.
Yes.
But before the election.
Correct. About a week before.
Even though Dr. Rubin was in the lead.
He was leading by a few percentage points, as I recall.
You would agree your great communication skills helped him be in the lead.
They played a part.
And you watched that election happen on November 8th, 2022.
Yeah, I was up until they called the election.
Anxiously waiting for the results to come out.
Definitely.
So that you could make sure that Dr. Rubin lost.
Yes.
No further questions.
Thank you. Mr. Romero? You proceed.
Ms. Leach, I want to begin by asking you a few questions about your relationship with Dr. Rubin.
Sure.
You met Dr. Rubin at one of the most terrifying moments of your life.
Yeah, I had a cardiac arrest and I was at the hospital.
And Dr. Rubin saved your life from this cardiac arrest.
He did.
Shortly after, he offered you a position with his campaign for state senate.
Yes.
You became his driver and security.
Yes.
Dr. Rubin was running on a campaign as an anti-drug candidate.
Yeah, that was his one issue.
Okay, now let's talk about October 8th, 2022. You had the night off that night.
I did.
You were gonna go to dinner with your spouse.
Yes.
But before going to dinner, you checked the campaign Twitter page
I did.
at around 7 p.m.
Yeah, around then.
and you noticed a tweet that ended with "Love Tay."
Yeah, the one that talked about getting litty.
You assumed that this tweet was posted in error,
Yes,
and you immediately notified Dr. Rubin about the tweet.
I did.
Despite you having the night off on October 8th, you were with the candidate quite a bit.
Yeah,
But there were moments when the candidate was not in your eyesight.
no.
You did not live with the candidate,
No, I did not.
so you could not be sure what the candidate did when they went home.
No, when I wasn't around, I couldn't be sure.
Presumably, you did not accompany the candidate to the restroom,
I did not.
so you could not be sure what the candidate did when they went to the restroom.
That's true.
On October 8th, when you had the night off, you could not be sure what the candidate did that night.
No, I can't.
Even from your desk at the office, you can see the candidate's office.
Yeah, I can.
But when that door to that office is closed, you could not see inside.
No.
On October 10th, 2022, you saw Taylor Bricker go to that closed door.
I did.
You saw Taylor Bricker open that door,
Yes.
but you did not see what Taylor Bricker saw inside that closed office.
No, I did not.
And after this, a mere seconds after opening that door, Taylor Bricker went back to her own office.
She did.
Now let's talk about your prior career. You were a narcotics officer,
I was a detective in the narcotics unit for 2 years. Yes.
so you are familiar with the symptoms of cocaine use.
Yes.
Directing courting counsel's attention to what has been pre-identified as Exhibit 2. For the record, I am showing opposing counsel Exhibit 2. Permission to approach the witness?
You may.
Ms. Leach, are you familiar with what this is?
I am.
What is it?
This is one of Dr. Rubin's ads for his campaign.
How do you know what it is?
Well, I helped out on the campaign, so I saw these ads a couple of times.
Would you say it's a fair and accurate copy of one of the campaign ads?
It is.
Motion to admit as evidence?
Any objection?
No objection.
It will be admitted.
May we publish for the jury?
You may.
Ms. Leach, on this campaign ad, you intended this to gain votes from the voters.
I wasn't really involved in the campaign side of things. I was more just personal security.
But the campaign intended this to be used to gain votes from voters.
Yeah, from what I understand.
And it says here, the only anti-drug candidate.
Yes.
But you knew that Dr. Rubin was using cocaine.
No, he was not.
You were familiar with the symptoms of cocaine use, as you said earlier.
Yes.
And you noticed some of these symptoms in Dr. Rubin.
Sure.
He lost weight.
He did.
He had talkative habits.
He was on a campaign, yeah.
So yes.
Yes.
And he had boosting confidence.
Yes.
Despite you noticing these factors, you did not objectively look for more symptoms.
No, I did not.
And as a narcotics officer, you know that dilated pupils are a symptom of cocaine use.
They are?
You also know that rolled dollar bills are typically used to consume cocaine.
They can be, yes.
It's fair to say that you owe more to Dr. Rubin than to Taylor Bricker.
Yeah, Dr. Rubin saved my life.
And Taylor Bricker never did save your life.
No.
But as you just said, Dr. Rubin did.
Yes.
Thank you, nothing further.
Thank you. Thank you both for competing today. We'll wrap up around 3 p.m. At about 4 p.m., we'll publish the results via email. All right, call the matter of Rubin versus Bricker to order. Will the parties please state their appearances for the record?
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Lydia Maldonado for the plaintiff.
Good morning.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Jassy Poti for defense.
Good morning. Let's see here.
When Your Honor is ready, we're ready to open with opening statements.
Yeah, I'm just checking to see who's doing what. And it looks like you're going to do open and cross.
Yes.
And Ms. Murphy's going to do close and direct. Is that
Yes.
correct? All right. You may proceed with your opening statement.
Thank you, Your Honor. If I go down, you're going down with me. Members of the jury, that was the mentality of the defendant, Ms. Bricker, when she decided to write a story, a false story that she knew would end Dr. Rubin's career. But in order to understand the gravity of this decision by the defendant, we must understand who Dr. Rubin actually is. Dr. Rubin is a well-known and respected doctor within his community who saw the consequences and the horrors of the drug epidemic within our country. He saved the life of a former police officer, Jordan Leach, who you will hear from today from a fentanyl exposure. He took these experiences as a healthcare hero, and he used them to guide his anti-drug political campaign. Dr. Rubin was supported by thousands of people, and he vigorously worked to end the drug epidemic within our country. Now, members of the jury, jealousy and selfishness are the ultimate drivers within our political climate. The scandal is what prevails rather than the truth. And today, you will hear that taking down the hero will always be a story that sells. You will hear from the defendant today about how much she admired Dr. Rubin and his anti-drug stance. She wanted to work for him, and when he ran for campaign, she immediately knew she had to jump on and be his communications coordinator. On October 8th, the defendant broadcasted the very thing that Joe Rubin's campaign was against: substance abuse. 2 hours later, when the defendant finally realized her mistake, she deleted the tweet, but the damage was already done. Now, nonetheless, despite her recklessness on social media, the defendant decided to write an article about Dr. Rubin. And what she will tell you is that upon walking into his office the day that she was fired, she saw Dr. Rubin in his office, she saw a white substance, she didn't test the substance, and she didn't call the police. The defendant didn't do anything in that moment to verify that Dr. Rubin was doing drugs, but instead, she decided to write an op-ed about him that was published in the McGeorge Times. Now, this article, ladies and gentlemen, is the exact reason why we are here today. This article talked about how Dr. Rubin was a cocaine user. The same man that the defendant admired, the same man that had been working in his community to rid the streets of substances, the same man who she had worked with for over a year. She was now naming him as a drug addict, a liar, and a fraud. This article was published in the same newspaper that had supported Dr. Rubin throughout his campaign, the same newspaper that his family and friends would read, the same newspaper that landed in the hands of people who were ready to vote for him. Now, you may ask yourselves, why would the defendant do something like this? Why would she write an article about the man that she admired? And this question will be answered for you at the end of this trial when my co-counsel comes before you and asks that you find the defendant liable for defamation. Members of the jury, Remember this. If I go down, you're going down with me. The defendant wrote the tweet, she was fired the next day, and just weeks after that, she published her article. Consider the facts. Consider the choices that the defendant made that have led us here today. At the end of the day, we are here to clear the name of Dr. Rubin, a hero who dedicated his life to saving others. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hofey, your direct examination.
Your Honor, defense calls Ms. Taylor Bricker to the stand.
Ms. Bricker?
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes.
Good morning. Could you please state your full name for the record?
Good morning. My name is Taylor Bricker.
Ms. Bricker, let's start about your personal background. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I was born and raised in the city of McGeorge, and I went to University of the Pacifica, majored in political science, summa cum laude, in May of 2021.
And when you graduated from the University of Pacifica, did you plan on working afterwards?
Yes, I'm a political junkie, so I really wanted to get into politics as soon as possible. And a week before graduation, I saw a posting about Dr. Rubin's campaign in regards to needing a communications coordinator.
And why did you want to work for Dr. Rubin's campaign?
Not only did I like that he did not have any party affiliation, I thought that was refreshing, but I also connected with his anti-drug campaign, given my personal experiences.
And why did his anti-drug campaign connect with you so much?
I had a roommate who was a really good friend who was addicted to cocaine, and I was one of the friends that coordinated an intervention for them because it got pretty serious.
And how was your experience working with Dr. Rubin and under his employment?
Honestly, it was pretty boring. I thought it was going to be much more exciting. I had to painstakingly look over every single word. I wrote drafts, like mailers for voters, and I was in charge of his social media accounts. It was nothing exciting.
And let's talk about the communications strategy team that you were a part of. So on the night of October 8th, what happened that night?
That night I made a huge mistake. I tweeted on Dr. Rubin's account thinking it was my own about my plans later that night.
And when was that tweet made?
Around 7 p.m.
And what did that tweet say?
It said, "Be dizzy, can't wait to get litty at the club tonight, love Tay."
And when did you realize that you made this mistake?
About 2 hours later, but the moment I saw it, I immediately deleted it.
And once it was deleted, who did you inform about this?
I felt so guilty that I informed the campaign manager about this tweet, and I told them what happened, and I deleted it.
And how did this campaign manager reply back to you?
She texted me the next day, and she said it's no big deal, it's deleted, and that we'll have a meeting on Monday at 8:15 in regards to strategies to prevent this from happening again.
Now let's talk about Monday morning when that meeting was supposed to happen. What time did you arrive to work?
I arrived there around 8 o'clock in the morning.
8 o'clock. And what time was that meeting set for?
8:15 in the morning.
And what time did you arrive for that meeting in Dr. Rubin's office?
I arrived a little bit early, so like around 8:04 a.m. I know it was early, but I just really wanted to get that meeting started.
So what happened when you arrived 10 minutes earlier than that expected meeting time in that office?
It's ingrained in my head. I saw Dr. Rubin in his mahogany desk, what it looked like snorting cocaine. I saw white powder all over his desk, and I looked into his eyes.
And how did you know that was cocaine, Ms. Bricker?
Just by what I saw. I mean, rolled up dollar bill on his one hand and white powder all over there. It looked so similar to what my roommate was going through. So that was an immediate connection to it.
And how did Dr. Rubin react when he saw you?
He just looked at me and looked very shocked to see me observe him doing that.
And how did you feel seeing Dr. Rubin with cocaine, that rolled up dollar bill behind his mahogany desk? How did you feel?
I felt honestly betrayed. I saw a really close friend go through addiction, and to see this politician campaign about anti-drug and then himself doing drugs, I was really upset about it.
And who did you report this incident to?
I tried to report it to the campaign manager, but she wouldn't listen. She fired me the moment I said something and said that I was doing drugs.
And how did you feel about being fired?
I felt devastated, like they took my dignity away.
And what else happened once you were fired?
I decided to write an op-ed. The voters needed to know what happened.
So let's talk about that op-ed. It was published on November 1st. When was it published?
November 1st, like you said.
And why did you publish it?
Because I needed the voters to know who he really was. I mean, I know the voters connected like I did with him on his anti-drug campaign, and they needed to know the truth.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Your Honor, may I proceed with the cross?
You may.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I want to start with your background.
Okay.
You attended the University of the Pacifica.
Yes,
You majored in political science.
I did.
And you always dreamt of working for a political campaign.
Yes,
And you got to do that with Dr. Rubin's campaign.
I did.
You were excited about the opportunity.
I was.
And you were the communications coordinator for his campaign, correct?
Correct.
That includes communications through social media?
Yes.
But you don't work for Dr. Rubin anymore, do you?
No, I was fired.
Let's talk about why you don't work there. So you had access to Dr. Rubin's accounts, correct?
Yes.
And you would post on his behalf frequently.
Yes.
On October 8th, you accidentally tweeted from his account.
Yeah, it was a mistake.
At Be Dizzy, can't wait to get Liddy in the club. Love, Tay.
I did tweet that.
So you you realized afterwards that it wasn't your personal account that you tweeted this from.
Yeah, the moment I saw it, I deleted it.
Okay, and then the next morning you were fired.
Yeah, the next day I went into the office, I was fired, yes.
You didn't speak to Dr. Rubin that day, correct?
No, I only saw him.
You didn't speak to Dr. Rubin ever after that.
No.
But you decided that you would post an article naming Dr. Rubin?
Yes.
Now, let's talk more about this article. You posted it for the McGeorge Times?
I did.
And you talked about your roommate's battle with addiction, correct?
I did.
You talked about the daily negative effects of drug abuse?
Yes.
You also talked about how you wanted to work for Dr. Rubin.
I did.
How you admired and looked up to his anti-drug stance.
Yeah, I did.
And so you named him you say that you wrote your article because he was using drugs?
He was.
Now, let's talk more about what you saw, or rather didn't see, on the morning that you were supposed to be with Dr. Rubin. You saw Dr. Rubin.
Yes.
You saw him for a few seconds.
Yes.
You saw a white substance.
Yeah, I saw cocaine.
That's not what I asked. You saw a white substance.
Yes.
You don't know what that substance is.
I'm pretty sure it was cocaine.
But you didn't test it.
I didn't test it.
You didn't call the police.
I didn't call the police.
You didn't take photos of this substance.
No, I didn't take photos.
In fact, you didn't do anything to verify that the substance that was in Dr. Rubin's office was cocaine.
That's true.
You only talked about the drugs in your article.
That's true, and the campaign manager as well.
And this article was posted after you were fired?
That's true.
And this article was also published just days before the election?
It was.
You saw that Dr. Rubin lost the election.
Yes, he did.
He had been leading the race prior to your article being published.
Yes, by a couple points.
But you named him in your article as a drug abuser.
I did.
Where you have no concrete proof that what you saw was drugs.
All I have is what I saw.
You didn't test them.
I didn't.
You didn't take photos of the substance.
No.
You didn't call anyone?
No.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Thank you. Sophie, when you're ready to proceed, you may.
The truth and only the truth. That is why we are here today, members of the jury. On November 1st, 2022, Ms. Taylor Bricker published an op-ed through McGeorge Times. As the plaintiff alleges, that article contributed to the downfall of Dr. Rubin's Senate campaign, and the plaintiff alleges a defamation case against Ms. Bricker. However, the truth is about being who you truly are, what you represent, what you stand for, how honest you are to yourself. That is what the truth is. And that is exactly what Ms. Taylor Bricker posted on that op-ed on November 1st, 2022. She saw the truth, she wrote the truth, and she's the only one who published the truth. Now the plaintiff here has the burden of proof. They have to prove more likely than not that Ms. Taylor Bricker's statements were false. And that is the core element of defamation, that they have to prove that the statements made by Ms. Bricker today, the op-ed that was published on November 1st, was false. Yet again, Ms. Taylor is just speaking her truth. She saw the exact opposite of what Dr. Rubin stands for. She saw the actual truth and only the truth. Jordan Leach testified on the stand today that Dr. Rubin saved his life in the line of service of 2021. He said that he felt as if he owed his life to Dr. Rubin because his life was saved. He was blinded by his savior, Dr. Rubin. He has a strong bias to not objectively see the warning signs that Mr. Jordan Leach should have seen. Mr. Jordan Leach has testified that he's a former retired police officer that's worked 3 years in the narcotics division. Someone that has testified that objective signs of cocaine use include confidence, talkativeness, weight loss, dilated pupils, signs that Ms. Taylor Bricker here saw today, and that Jordan Leach did not objectively see. Ms. Taylor Bricker, on the other hand, a fresh out of college student, she's ecstatic, she's excited, she is a political junkie. She wanted to work with Dr. Rubin's anti-drug message campaign because it resonated with her so much. She thought that that was the truth. She thought that what she was signing up for was something that hits close to her heart. But unfortunately, she witnessed the truth. She was the only one that witnessed that truth, unfortunately. Ms. Taylor Bricker here today mentioned that she saw what cocaine use does to a former roommate. She has a personal connection to it. She has no other emotion. She has no other driving factor but the truth. She's the only one that saw this happen. And yet when she tried to speak her truth to her campaign manager, she was shut down. She was shut down for her truth. She wanted to relay this message. She wanted the people to know, the people that are voting for Dr. Rubin, that he doesn't need your votes. He needs your professional help, because that is what the truth is. She saw the truth. She wrote the truth. She only published the truth. And therefore, Ms. Taylor Bricker should not be liable for defamation.
Thank you. Thank you both for competing. We're gonna. Excellent round. We're going to finish up around 3 p.m. and publish the results.
Just
All right, we'll call the matter of Rubin versus Bricker to order. Do parties please state your appearances for the record?
Scott Sound for the plaintiff, Your Honor.
Kevin Moore for the defendant.
Good afternoon. Mr. Allen, what portions of the trial will you be doing today?
I'm doing the direct examination of Ms. Jordan Leach and the closing arguments, Your Honor.
The same. For the defendant, sorry.
We'll begin with the direct examination by you, Mr. Allen.
Thank you, Your Honor. The plaintiff calls Ms. Jordan Leach to the stand. Good afternoon, Ms. Leach.
Good afternoon.
Could you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Hi, I'm Jordan Leach. I used to be a police officer here at McGeorge, but now I work as private security.
Who do you work for private security for?
For Dr. Joe Rubin.
And how did you come to meet Dr. Joe Rubin?
It's kind of a crazy story. Back when I was still in the narcotics unit, I was investigating a car during a traffic stop and came into contact with fentanyl. I had an adverse reaction, went into cardiac arrest, and Dr. Rubin saved me.
You mentioned earlier that you worked as private security for Dr. Rubin. Could you explain more what that job entails, please?
Yeah, so after I heard that he was running for office, he offered me that position. At that point, I really didn't want to be on the police force after, almost dying, and I supported his anti-drug message. So I drive him to campaign events and provide him security while he's there.
Excellent, thank you. And do you happen to know the defendant, Ms. Bricker?
I do. She worked on the campaign.
What did she do for the campaign?
She was the communications coordinator, I think was her exact title. Basically, she put together flyers, ran the social media accounts, that kind of thing.
In your opinion, Ms. Leach, how well did Ms. Bricker do in that role?
It seemed pretty good to me. There was just this one time that she tweeted something out that she probably shouldn't have.
What was that tweet? Can you explain what that was?
Yeah, so that night I had off of work. Dr. Rubin didn't have any events. I started to check Twitter and I saw on the Twitter account a tweet that said, @BeDizzy, can't wait to get litty at the club tonight, love Tay.
How did you know that it was Ms. Bricker that posted that tweet?
Tay was Taylor's nickname and she was in charge of the social media accounts.
Ms. Leach, when was this tweet posted? Do you remember?
This was about 7 p.m. on October 8th, 2022.
And was Ms. Bricker ever disciplined for this matter?
The next day was a Monday, and when I went to go pick Dr. Rubin up to bring him into the office, he started talking about it, about how this was a fireable offense and they would be firing Ms. Bricker when they got into the office that day.
And what was your role in this termination?
Because I was private security, Dr. Rubin told me to be prepared to walk Ms. Bricker out of the office.
How did she take getting terminated?
Not well. As I was walking her out of the office, she turned to me and said, "Fuck that guy, I'm going to make him pay for this."
When did you discover the allegations against Dr. Rubin?
At the same time everybody else did when they were published in the McGeorge Times.
Would you recognize this article if I were to show it to you today?
I would.
Directing opposing counsel to what has been pre-marked as Exhibit 1, let the record reflect that I have in my hand Exhibit 1. Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Ms. Leach, do you recognize Exhibit 1?
I do.
How do you recognize Exhibit 1?
This is the article that came out.
Is Exhibit 1 a true and correct copy of the article that you read?
It is.
Ms. Leach, excuse me, Your Honor, plaintiff moves into evidence Exhibit 1.
Any objection? No. It'll be admitted.
May I publish the exhibit to the jury, Your Honor?
May.
Thank you. Please pass this around. Sorry, thank you. Ms. Leach, how did you feel about this article?
I was shocked. The most important reason that a lot of us support Joe Rubin is because of his anti-drug stance. He's a doctor. He wants to limit and discourage the use of drugs. So the accusation that he himself would be doing cocaine it was shocking, to say the least.
Why was it shocking?
That goes against exactly what he stands for and what he was campaigning for. The fact that he saved my life after that accidental contact with fentanyl and has worked so hard to prevent more drug use, it just doesn't seem like him at all.
And how many times did you see Dr. Rubin actually use cocaine?
Never.
Thank you, Ms. Leach. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. This witness can be excused.
Your Honor, plaintiff rests his case in chief.
Thank you. the defense have any witnesses it intends to call?
Defense would call Miss Taylor Bricker to the scene.
Hi, Ms. Bricker.
Hi.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'd like to start with some background. Can you tell the jury a little bit about yourself?
Yes. Hi. My name is Taylor Bricker. I am a political science graduate from University of the Pacifica. Graduated in May 2021.
Did you do well in school?
Yes, I graduated summa cum laude.
What's that?
It's basically the really high GPA.
When you graduated, what did you want to do afterwards?
I like to call myself a political junkie. I love politics. So a week prior to graduating, I was really excited to see a job posting for a campaign, Dr. Rubin's campaign.
Did you get a job?
Yes, I applied as the communications coordinator and I got hired.
And what was your job there?
I would be in task of making mailers for voters as well as handling the social media accounts.
Okay. When you were hired, what would you describe the process as?
Very boring. I expected it to be very exhilarating, but in reality, it was just me looking over every single word. That was all I would have to do.
Okay, let's address that and then we'll go back to the actual hiring process. You said that it was boring. Why did you still want to work there?
I was really passionate about the campaign that Dr. Rubin was putting forward to the voters. I mean, his anti-drug campaign really connected to me on a personal level, as well as him just not affiliating with any political party right now. I thought that was impressive.
So, was there an interview process?
There was.
And who interviewed you?
The campaign manager.
What would you say that was like?
It was a really good interview. I mean, I got the job.
Let's move forward to the day of the incident, October the 10th. What happened on that day?
Yes, I accidentally tweeted something. I thought it was being tweeted on my personal account and not my actual, and not Dr. Rubin's account, but it was Dr. Rubin's account.
Okay, so that was October the 8th?
Yes, and October 10th I got fired.
What happened on October the 8th after you made that text?
After I saw that, I immediately deleted it and I felt really guilty, so I texted the campaign manager letting me know what happened.
Objection, Your Honor, as to hearsay, this is an out-of-court statement offered for the truth of the matter asserted. As an offer of proof, plaintiff also believes that the witness is about to talk about certain text message that haven't been brought to us today at trial. As such, plaintiff also objects as to the best evidence rule under Federal Rules of Evidence 1002. We don't have these text messages here.
Understood. Overruled.
Thank you, Your Honor. Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. On the morning of October the 10th, what happened when you came to work?
I got to work and I arrived early, so I walked into Dr. Rubin's office because we had a meeting at 8:15.
Okay. When you got into the office, what did you see?
I couldn't believe my eyes. I saw Dr. Rubin with a dollar bill on one hand rolled up and white powder that was cocaine on his mahogany desk, and I looked into his eyes and I was in shock.
So you looked into his eyes. Did you notice anything about them? What did you see there?
Yeah, his eyes were open wide, they were dilated. I went to my office after that. I couldn't believe it.
How long were you in his office for?
Like a couple of seconds.
And after you left, what happened then?
I went to my office and then the campaign manager went into my office and I tried to tell her what happened, but she didn't listen to me. She accused me of being, addicted to drugs and fired me right then and there.
Okay. What happened next?
I held my head up high and I left the place without saying anything.
So what happened after you were fired?
After I was fired, I decided that I needed to tell the voters the truth, what happens behind closed doors, that this guy is not who he says he is, because they connected personally to his message like I did, and then they needed to know the truth, so I submitted an article to the McGeorge Times.
And why did you decide to submit that article?
Because they need to know the truth and how much of a hypocrite this guy was.
No further questions.
Thank you. or excuse Ms. Bricker. Mr. Allen, ready to proceed on your closing argument? You may.
Yes, Your Honor. Scorned staffer takes down local hero. This is the headline that should have been published in the McGeorge Times. Instead, a false headline would be printed that would cause a man to lose everything he worked for it to be taken away from him in the blink of an eye. While the plaintiff believes that we have proven the truth of this headline, we don't need or want it published. What Dr. Rubin really wants is to get it back his once good name and reputation in the community. What he wants is for the truth to be known and for the defendant to learn from her mistakes. Members of the jury, earlier today you heard testimony from Ms. Jordan Leach. Ms. Leach is a former narcotics detective from the McGeorge Police Department who crossed paths with Dr. Rubin in an incredibly unfortunate way when she was dying after having been exposed to fentanyl during her job as a narcotics detective. She was fighting for her life, and Dr. Rubin was there to save it, just as he has done for countless other patients. It was after this moment Dr. Rubin noticed that he and Ms. Leach shared something similar, a common mission to end our community's drug crisis. Now, defense would have you believe that Dr. Rubin abandoned this mission, that Dr. Rubin also does cocaine, that Dr. Rubin is a self-righteous hypocrite. This is absurd. We heard testimony today from Ms. Jordan Leach, a former narcotics detective turned personal security guard for Dr. Rubin. Not only did she have extensive training in drug recognition and its use, but she was with Dr. Rubin every day of the campaign, to every event, accompanying him to every speech, from his home to his office. She was there. She knew his daily ritual and habits and schedule down to the minute. And what do we learn about Dr. Rubin from Ms. Leach? We learned that Dr. Rubin is not the cocaine-crazed cheat that Ms. Bricker would so have us believe shamelessly in her hit piece. We learned Dr. Rubin was who he said he was, a man trying to do what he could in his community, both inside the hospital, saving lives, and out, building a better future. We learned that Dr. Rubin is a competent, confident, and capable pillar of McGeorge. But you also heard from the defendant herself today. Ms. Bricker would have you believe that this confidence is a symptom and sign of his cocaine use, that there's no way that he could run a functional campaign and work the hospital without some hypocritical use of the very substance he swore to fight. This poetic irony is just the story Ms. Bricker needs people to believe to cover her own unprofessional mistakes. You see, Ms. Bricker made a mistake. As Dr. Rubin's communications coordinator, she ran and managed all of his social media accounts, including Dr. Rubin's Twitter. On the evening of October 8th, she tweeted something many people her age would tweet. @BeDizzy, can't wait to get litty at the club tonight. Love, Tay. Except members of the jury, she didn't post this on her private account. She posted this on Dr. Rubin's campaign account. The same Ms. Bricker who, how did she say it? I made sure to write this one down. She painstakingly obsessed over every single written word of Dr. Rubin's campaign for over a year. What might seem like a small mistake did not go unnoticed by the community. At best, it painted Dr. Rubin's campaign as having negligent and ineffective staffers. Alternatively, it painted Dr. Rubin as someone who is unfit to represent the community in the state senate. Members of the jury, what would anyone expect if they posted something inappropriate to their company's social media or website? And as we heard, Dr. Rubin planned on having his campaign manager fire Ms. Bricker not even 2 full days after that inappropriate post. And what did she do when she was fired? Ms. Bricker stormed out of the office and said, "Fuck that guy. I'm going to make him regret this." And how did she do it, members of the jury? By publishing this, an article which read, "But last month, I saw the real Dr. Rubin, the behind closed doors Dr. Rubin, the Dr. Rubin who does cocaine. It is the kind of image you never forget. Dr. Rubin sitting behind his mahogany desk with cocaine on the surface of the desk and a rolled up bill in his right hand." This is an awfully convenient article whose sole purpose was to make and paint Dr. Rubin as Pacifica's biggest hypocrite. A lie. And when was this lie published, members of the jury? Just 1 week before the election, an election that we all know Dr. Rubin lost. And when he woke up the next morning, having discovered that he lost that election by 10% of the vote, that wasn't all that he lost. An innocent, zealous advocate of our community had to watch as his whole life fell apart before his eyes. Scorned staffer takes down local hero. Find the defendant liable.
Thank you. Mr. Moore?
This is not just a case about money or reputation. This is a case about freedom. The freedom of speech, our freedom to hold our politicians accountable to the goal of eliminating drug abuse from our communities. Now, to overcome that, the plaintiff has the burden of proof by preponderance of the evidence to prove two main elements: that these statements my client made were false, and that she knew they were false when she made them. They have failed to meet that burden. Now, for the first element, examine Ms. Bricker's account on the morning of October 10th, when she saw in a brightly lit room Dr. Rubin, wide-eyed, pupils dilated, white powder at his desk with a neatly rolled bill in his hand. So convinced was she of what she was seeing was cocaine use, because she had seen it before with her roommate, that she immediately turned around and left without any time to accomplish her reason for being there. Now, recall what Ms. Leach testified were the signs of cocaine abuse: dilated pupils, residue, excitability, confidence, and talkativity. Ms. Leach also testified that she didn't see any of these signs on Dr. Rubin. But of course she wouldn't, because Dr. Rubin was careful. He used the bill to make sure that all of the residue stayed away from his face and his clothing. He only used it in his office where Mr. Leach couldn't see, behind a door that he thought he had locked. Ms. Leach also admitted that she wasn't looking for the signs. Why would she? This man was her employer, who she was indebted to for saving her life and claimed to be staunchly anti-drug. And that is why, despite the fact that Dr. Rubin was working excessively long hours in a field that demanded he maintain his confidence, his excitability, and his ability to talk, Ms. Leach overlooked the weight loss and all of the other signs that were right in front of her. For the second element, you have two possibilities before you. On the one hand, you have a brilliant woman, graduated summa cum laude with a bright future in politics ahead of her, who's willing to burn all of that down because she lost an entry-level position. Does that make sense? Because on the other hand, you have Miss Bricker, that same brilliant young woman who witnessed her employer, a man that she trusted, snorting cocaine at his desk. And because she knew that he needed help, because she had seen the kind of devastation that it brought to her own loved ones, and because she knows that the voters deserve to know what their politicians are doing behind supposedly locked doors, she had to write about it. Now, plaintiffs would have you believe the former. Ms. Leach testified that she heard my client say, "F that guy." So what? That doesn't change the facts, and that doesn't change what Ms. Bricker knew she saw that day. My client denies that she says that. And that means that Ms. Leach is mistaken. Mistaken because she is in a difficult position. Dr. Rubin is her employer, a man that she is indebted to for saving her life, that she believed in, and perhaps even more, believed in his mission. And all of that was crumbling at her feet. How do you rationalize that? Well, you tell yourself she is lying. Members of the jury, I ask that you protect her rights, that you protect our freedom to hold our politicians accountable. Examine the evidence, because the law and the evidence demands that you hold Ms. Leach not liable.
Thank you. And thank you both for competing this afternoon. We just have a few more trials. We'll be done by 3 p.m. and we should have the results emailed out to everybody by 4. Again, thanks a lot. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
We'll call the case of Rubin versus Bricker to order. Please state your appearances for the record.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Tanner Phillips for the plaintiff.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Destiny Snyder for the defendant.
Good afternoon. Mr. Phillips, what portions of the trial are you going to do today?
I will be conducting the opening statement and the cross-examination of Taylor Bricker.
And Ms. Snyder, I think you're doing the cross and closing, the direct and close. Correct. All right. Mr. Phillips, you may proceed with your opening statement when you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Adversity calls for integrity. Today, you will learn the defendant, Taylor Bricker, lacked integrity and decided to publish an article in the McGeorge Times, McGeorge's only newspaper, defaming Dr. Joe Rubin. Throughout today's trial, as you consider the facts of this case, you will be weighing the integrity of the defendant, Taylor Bricker, against the integrity of the plaintiff, Dr. Joe Rubin. Dr. Rubin is an emergency room physician in the state of Pacifica. He was widely respected among colleagues and patients alike, so much so that he decided to run for state senate. In order to do this, he hired a campaign communications coordinator, Ms. Taylor Bricker. Members of the jury, you will learn that the defendant, Ms. Bricker, was a highly intelligent young woman. She graduated as a summa cum laude valedictorian from the University of Pacifica, majoring in political science. For over a year and a half, Ms. Bricker painstakingly paid attention to every detail of her job to ensure that the positive public image of Dr. Rubin was maintained. She was successful, largely, until October 8th of 2022. It was on this evening that Ms. Bricker made a mistake. You will learn that she tweeted from the official campaign Twitter page for Dr. Rubin. The content of this tweet will be described by Mr. Jordan Leach, a veteran narcotics detective for the state of Pacifica. He will describe how the content of that tweet describes explicit alcohol and drug use. A tweet sent from a campaign centered entirely around anti-drug bipartisan issues referenced drug and alcohol use. Well, Dr. Rubin saw no choice. The stakes of the election were too high. So 2 days later, he decided to fire the defendant for this one mistake after 2 years of dedicated and consistent work. Members of the jury, you will hear from the defendant on the stand today. She will describe how that decision made her feel betrayed. In her own words, she was going to make Dr. Rubin pay for this. So what did she do? She thought, she plotted, and she schemed about how best to take her revenge. She decided to publish an article in the McGeorge Times accusing Dr. Rubin of drug use, the one thing that would contradict his entire campaign platform. She didn't publish this article days after she was fired. She published it weeks later, just days before the election. Members of the jury, how are we to know who to trust when these sorts of accusations come out against public officials that we put our faith in our vote in? The answer is in this room. The answer is with you. You must decide what the true motivation of that article was: integrity or revenge. At the end of today's trial, my co-counsel, Mr. Matlock, will answer that question for you and ask that you find the defendant liable for defamation. Thank you.
Thank you. So let's go out of order and have Ms. Snyder do your direct examination now.
Thank you, Your Honor. The defense calls Taylor Bricker to the stand. Good morning, Ms. Bricker.
Good morning.
Are you familiar with the plaintiff, Dr. Rubin?
I am, yes.
How so?
I worked for him as his communications coordinator.
And how did you come to hold this position?
Right before I graduated, I saw a posting for his ad, or for his campaign, and I applied to be a communications coordinator because I was so drawn to his campaign message of anti-drug.
Who else worked on the campaign with you?
The manager and the security officer, Leach.
Regarding your position with the campaign, can you tell the court a little bit about what responsibilities you had?
Yeah, I drafted voters. I drafted mailers for voters as well as managing Dr. Rubin's social media accounts.
Earlier you mentioned that you were drawn to Dr. Rubin's anti-drug campaign. Can you tell us why?
Yes, unfortunately I had a personal experience with cocaine addiction. Not myself, but my college roommate, and I actually was one of the few that coordinated an intervention for my roommate because it got really serious.
Did you ever witness your roommate using cocaine?
I did.
Turning to October 8th, do you recall using any of the campaign's social media platforms?
Unfortunately, yes.
Why do you say unfortunately?
Because it was a huge mistake. I was under the impression I was using my own social media account, but I then realized once I saw the tweet that it was actually in Dr. Rubin's account.
Did you notify anybody with the campaign once you realized the error?
Yes, as soon as I realized the error, I deleted it, and then I let the campaign manager know because I felt really guilty about it.
And the campaign manager is Jennifer Lee?
She is.
Did she respond to you?
She did the next day. I couldn't sleep until I heard back from her, and she assured me that everything was okay so long as it was deleted, which it was, and that we'd have a meeting the next day at 8:15 a.m. to discuss how to prevent this from not happening again.
Did you go to work the next day?
I did.
Did you attend the meeting the next day?
We didn't have a meeting. I got there early, and I got to Dr. Rubin's office early in preparation for this meeting, and instead I saw something else.
What did you see?
I saw Dr. Rubin with his right hand holding a dollar bill rolled up and cocaine on his desk, snorting cocaine.
What did you do?
I was in shock, honestly. I mean, a doctor saying, anti-drug this, anti-drug that, and then doing cocaine behind closed doors, I couldn't believe my eyes. I made eye contact with him, and His eyes were dilated, and I just ran back to my office.
What did you do once you got back to your office?
Once I was there, I honestly was so in shock. I couldn't believe my eyes, and the campaign manager walked in and said that I was using drugs and that I was fired.
After you and the campaign parted ways, did you share with anybody else what you had experienced and what you had witnessed at the office that day?
I felt like I had a duty to share with the voters that I was helping this campaign advocate for the truth about Dr. Rubin, because like myself, I connected with my personal experience. I know many other voters did as well, so I had to tell them the truth.
And how did you do that?
I submitted an article to the McGeorge Times, and I let them know what I saw and why this is not acceptable and that he needs help, professional help.
Your Honor, I would like to draw the court's attention to Exhibit 1. Ms. Bricker, is this the article that you wrote?
It is.
And again, can you tell the court why you wrote the article?
I wrote that article to tell the truth about the voters, to the voters.
To your knowledge, is there anything in that article that is false?
No, I write what I saw, and what I saw was the truth.
Thank you, Ms. Bricker. No further questions.
Thank you. Just now realizing that we didn't take it out of order. You can cross-examine the witness.
Quite all right, thank you. Good afternoon, Ms. Bricker.
Good afternoon.
I want to start off in the spring of 2020. You were graduating as a summa cum laude valedictorian of political science, right?
2021, yes.
Okay. Before you even got your degree, you were hired by Dr. Rubin's campaign, right?
Yes.
And that was as the campaign communications coordinator, correct? Yes. Now, the message, the anti-drug platform that Dr. Rubin used resonated with you personally, right?
It did.
So for the next year and a half, you worked tirelessly, right?
I wanted to do a good job.
Your responsibilities included supervising the social media accounts for Dr. Rubin.
Yes.
And in doing so, you pored over every painstaking fact in those social media posts, right?
I looked over every word.
At times, you would describe the work as excruciating, wouldn't you?
I would.
Over the course of a year and a half, you didn't make many mistakes, did you?
I didn't.
And that's because of the hard work and dedication that you put in to your job.
Yes, that's true.
October 8th, 2022. That evening, you made a tweet at 7 p.m., right?
Right.
That tweet was a mistake.
I'm only human.
And the content of that tweet wasn't appropriate for Dr. Rubin's campaign.
It was not.
You immediately realized that it was a mistake.
Yes.
You felt guilty about it.
I did.
You instantly contacted the campaign coordinator, Jennifer Lee.
I did.
That tweet was taken down within 2 hours of it being posted, right?
Yes, the moment I saw it, I deleted it.
And after your conversation with the campaign manager, you thought everything was fine.
Yes.
2 days later, you were fired.
I was.
Let's talk about the morning you were fired. You mentioned on direct examination that you were in the room with Dr. Rubin, and you stated that you saw him using drugs.
Yes.
Now, there was only you and Dr. Rubin in that room, right?
Right.
No one else was present.
No one else.
In the year and a half prior to that morning, you had never seen Dr. Rubin use drugs, right?
I've never seen him, no.
To your knowledge, no one in the campaign told you that they had seen Dr. Rubin use drugs.
No.
It was just that one morning, right?
Yeah.
The morning you were fired.
Yeah.
Now, you said that you saw him use drugs that morning, so you left the office right after you were fired, right?
Yes.
And surely, right as you left the office, you contacted the police to report the drug use, right?
No, I didn't.
Did you contact the police days later?
No.
Weeks later?
No.
Mrs. Bricker, you sat on that information until you published it in an article days before the election, right?
I tried to tell the campaign manager, she wouldn't listen to me.
I'm not asking if you told the campaign manager. I want to know whether you told the authorities.
I didn't.
So you waited to publish that article, not days after you were fired, right?
Right.
But days before the election.
I submitted it to the McGeorge Times. I'm not in charge of publishing things.
So that's a yes. It was published days before Dr. Rubin's election, wasn't it?
It was.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Snyder.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, may I begin?
You may.
The taker of the Hippocratic Oath is a hypocrite. Members of the jury, today you have heard two sides of the story, but the facts remain the same. Dr. Rubin sold the public an image of himself that simply was not true. He called himself the only anti-drug candidate, when in fact, he had used cocaine in his campaign office, on his campaign desk, the very place from where his anti-drug message was being generated. Taylor Bricker knows what she saw. Having witnessed her own college roommate's cocaine addiction, she has become very familiar with the drug. She knows what it looks like, and she knows when she sees somebody using it. Jordan Leach owes Dr. Rubin his life. It is understandable that Mr. Leach would wish to protect Dr. Rubin. But Mr. Leach testified in this courtroom to having witnessed Dr. Rubin exhibiting characteristics consistent with a person who is using cocaine. The bouts of confidence, the boosts in talkativeness, the weight loss. All of these are characteristics that Jordan Leach described a person using cocaine as having. What happened on October 8th? We know that Mr. Leach wasn't working, and that at approximately 7 p.m., he saw the tweet that Ms. Bricker posted. According to Mr. Leach, he immediately notified Dr. Rubin of the tweet. We know that at 9 p.m., Ms. Bricker deleted the tweet. At no time between the hours of 7 p.m. and 9 p.m., 2 hours, did anybody from the campaign contact Ms. Bricker regarding the tweet. Surely, something so egregious as to warrant it a fireable offense would have been brought to Ms. Bricker's attention immediately. Yet it was not. In fact, it was Ms. Bricker who notified campaign manager Jennifer Lee of the tweet the same night that it was posted. She did not reply until the next morning. And when she did, she said, "Okay, what's done is done. It's been deleted." She then let Ms. Bricker know that Dr. Rubin wished to meet with her on Monday morning at 8:15 to discuss campaign communication strategies. On Monday morning, my client went to work as planned. Hearing Dr. Rubin in his office, she went to speak with him. She walked towards the door and noticed it was closed. She began to knock and turn the knob. And that's when she was struck by an image. Dr. Rubin, the anti-drug candidate, behind his mahogany desk, white powder on the desk, dollar bill in hand. Devastated and shocked by what she had just seen, my client went back to her office with one realization: that Dr. Rubin, the anti-drug candidate, was in fact a cocaine user. My client quite literally saw behind closed doors, and what she saw was a hypocrite. Members of the jury, there was no 8:15 strategy meeting. Instead, Jennifer Lee and Dr. Rubin met behind closed doors to figure out what they were going to do with the problem they now had on their hands. Taylor has just seen Joe using cocaine. What are they going to do?
At 8:30, they fired Ms. Bricker, blaming it on the tweet. It's pretty convenient. What's more, they convinced Jordan Leach to fabricate a story about Ms. Bricker's firing, claiming that he had heard about it from Dr. Rubin the morning of. But that was a lie. It was an opportunity for Mr. Leach to save the political life of the man who had saved his actual life. Despite all of this, my client knew that she had a duty to the voters to tell them the truth. And that is what she did when she wrote the article. She told the truth. Today, the plaintiff must have proven by clear and convincing evidence that Taylor Bricker is liable for defaming Joe Rubin. In order to do that, they must have proven that the statements that Taylor Bricker made in her op-ed were false. More than that, thank you.
Thank you. And thank you both for competing this afternoon. All right, call the matter of Rubin versus Bricker to order. Will the parties please state their appearances for the record?
I'm Nicholas Peterson, here for Dr. Rubin, on behalf of the plaintiff.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Brandon Rosado, counsel for Taylor Bricker today.
Good afternoon. I have you both doing an opening statement and a cross-examination, is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, plaintiff, you may proceed with your opening statement when you're ready.
Ladies and gentlemen, members of the jury, please pardon my French. Fuck that guy. I'm going to make him regret this. These are the words Miss Bricker said as she left Dr. Rubin's office. And these are the words she said after she was fired from her job. These are the words of someone who thirsts for revenge. Now, most of us fall a time or two in our lives. Some of us make mistakes. Some of us embarrass ourselves. Sometimes we even lose a job. But most of us, we pick ourselves up. We move forward. We keep on. Most of us do not seek revenge. I am going to make him regret this. This is a case about a begrudging ex-employee and a political operative, Miss Bricker, who had so much shame, who was so embarrassed that she had shared a tweet with the world that cost her job, that she decided she would rather harm an innocent man rather than to pick her own self up by her bootstraps. Now, mind you, this is the same person who said, "Let's get litty at the club." Now, the evidence will show, the evidence will show, and this case is about, an innocent man, a good man, Dr. Rubin, a local prominent doctor, an ER room physician, a hero who has saved countless lives, who saved the life of a detective you'll hear from today, and who cared so deeply about the drug crisis in our country that he decided to run for state senate, not as a partisan, but as a single anti-drug message candidate. The evidence will show that Miss Bricker claims she's compassionate, and yet she's willing to not only accuse Dr. Rubin of being afflicted with a terrible disease, but then she's willing to shame him for it and publish an article about it in the newspaper. The evidence will show that Miss Bricker alleges Dr. Rubin is in the thralls of drug addiction, but not based on the year and a half she worked for him, not based on the nearly 2 years she was with him, but based on the few seconds she claims she saw him. She saw him on the morning of October the 10th, the same exact morning she happened to be fired. The evidence will show
that Ms. Bricker then waited. She strategically waited nearly 1 whole month after she was fired to publish the article, which at that point was then a mere matter of days. She waited a mere matter of days before the election. Why? Because she wanted her allegations to truly sting, to sabotage the entire campaign of Dr. Rubin, as well as his mission and his reputation. Today, you will hear from Miss Jordan Leach. Now, Miss Leach is a former narcotics detective and trained drug expert. She will testify that not once did she see or suspect Dr. Rubin of using drugs. Not once did she even suspect him of using cocaine or having any other addiction. And she was with him for 18 months, more than any other person on the campaign trail. Now, this case, it's not about a smoking gun. It's not about a I gotcha moment. It's not about freedom of speech. It's not about a blame game. It's not even about substance abuse. What this case is about, it is about credibility. It is about the truth. Now, folks, you're gonna have to decide that truth today. And you're gonna have to decide whose truth do you believe? Whose word do you buy? A former narcotics detective, an ER room physician, or a vindictive, ambitious, political operative, Miss Bricker, who was at the top of her class, who knew best how to get back at her boss, who had never made a mistake before in her political career. And she decided to strike, and she knew how to strike at the heart of her boss, Dr. Rubin. So today, folks, by the end of this case, the plaintiff will have met his burden, because the evidence is so clear. It is so convincing that Miss Bricker, had made false statements that we will ask you to hold her liable for defaming Dr. Rubin. We will ask you to hold her accountable, because words do matter. Words have consequences. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rossetto.
Yes, Your Honor. Taylor saw the truth behind closed doors. It's early morning, inside the Rubin campaign headquarters, 8 a.m. The office is still quiet, and it doesn't look like anyone's around. Except there's one man in his private office, alone with the door closed. That man is pacing back and forth, scratching his head, wondering how he can stay at the top of the polls just a little bit longer. He's worried. He's upset. He looks up at the clock on his wall. It reads 8:04. Double checks his watch to make sure he has time, he thinks. Rushes over to his desk, opens a drawer, pulls out two things. A rolled up paper bill in his right hand, and a bag of cocaine in the other. Pours some out over his mahogany desk, takes a seat, and you know what happens next. Finally, he's relaxed. He thinks all his problems have gone away until he looks up and locks eyes with Taylor Bricker, his employee. Members of the jury, that man, that morning, was the plaintiff, Joe Rubin. I'm here today on behalf of Taylor Bricker, the employee who was fired after seeing her boss that morning. What I'm going to do today is very simple. Just tell you what Taylor saw. Just tell you the truth behind closed doors. That's all this case is really about. But the plaintiff's attorney already told you what he believes. Mr. Peterson got up here, stood where I'm standing, told you this is a case about an innocent man. That Taylor sought to get revenge on her employer. He even tried to describe Taylor Brickert. Folks, you're going to get a chance to meet Taylor for yourselves when she gets up on that stand and tells you what she saw. I actually want to talk a little bit about something Mr. Peterson didn't mention. That's his burden today. It's his job, and his alone, to prove by a preponderance of the evidence that Taylor published an article about the plaintiff. People believed it was about the plaintiff, and the article said the plaintiff does cocaine. Now, we don't dispute any of that. Taylor will admit to it herself. But the last thing he has to prove is that Taylor lied in that article. And with the evidence today, you'll learn he just can't meet that burden. See, he's going to call someone named Jordan Leach to this stand, who will actually tell you herself she saw symptoms of cocaine use in the plaintiff, that she owes her life to the plaintiff, and that she has no idea what happened inside that office that morning. Taylor, on the other hand, she knows what happened. She was there. She's going to tell you all what she saw, and then you'll know what happened. You'll know the truth behind closed doors. When you see that the plaintiff can't meet their burden by the end of this trial, I'll come before you once more, and I'll ask you to find Taylor Bricker not lying.
Thank you. I think typically we'd have to start with the cross-examination by defense, but let's give you a break and we'll have Mr. Peterson conduct his cross-examination at this point.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Bricker, I have a few questions for you. Ms. Bricker, Dr. Rubin was passionate about one message. Isn't that true?
It's true.
And that one message was his anti-drug message?
Yes.
And would you agree that any accusations Dr. Rubin used illegal drugs could cost him an election?
That's true.
That's true. And are you able to recognize drug addiction?
I know from personal experience.
So, and this is because you had a close friend that struggled with addiction?
Unfortunately, yes.
And you're a science major, right?
Political science.
Political science. Which political science class did you take in which they trained you to identify drug addiction, or diagnose, rather, drug addiction?
I said from my personal experience, I know cocaine, but no classes taken.
No class. But you claim Dr. Rubin is a drug addict, isn't that true?
I did.
And you claim this because you claim you saw him use cocaine.
I did see him use cocaine.
Okay, and you claim the morning you claim you saw him use cocaine, you claim his pupils were dilated?
Yes.
You claim you saw white powder?
Yes.
And you were in his office for about how long? 3 seconds? 5 seconds?
I wasn't counting, but a couple of seconds, yes.
A couple seconds to say fair. It's fair to say 3.
Fair.
Okay, so Ms. Bricker, I just want to review here with you real quick. So on that morning, you claim you saw Dr. Rubin with white powder.
Yes.
His pupils were dilated.
Yes.
You saw him for less than a few seconds.
Yes.
Oh, and you were across the room from him.
Yes, and I saw him holding a rolled up dollar bill.
Okay. I just want to show you something real quick. Let me show you something. Bear with me, please. No, Miss Bricker, is that cocaine? I mean, that's cocaine, isn't it?
I don't know unless you have a dollar bill in your hand.
Well, I mean, Fair enough. Good. Can you definitively tell me that this is cocaine?
No.
And, Ms. Bricker, are my pupils dilated? Can you tell from across the room?
I cannot.
And, I mean, that's white powder, right?
Yes.
And cocaine is white.
It is white.
Okay, and, you would be, you'd be shocked. You'd be surprised to discover actually that this is vanilla protein powder. And, is it possible that on that morning that you saw something else?
No.
It's not possible. There's not a smidgen of possibility.
I think with context and what he was doing with the rolled up bill, it gave me pretty good indication it was cocaine.
Okay. Let's talk about the morning of October the 10th. On October the 10th, you were fired. Is that correct?
I was.
And October the 10th is when you claim you saw, the only time you saw Dr. Rubin using cocaine.
Yes.
So isn't it true, I'm sorry, you're telling me, and you're telling the jury here, that the very same day you were fired is the same day you saw Dr. Rubin using cocaine?
That's what I'm saying.
And after you left his office, you met with Miss Jordan Lee?
I did.
And Miss Lee then informed you that you're being fired?
She did tell me that.
So after she told you were being fired, did you tell Miss Lay that you just saw Dr. Rubin using cocaine?
I tried to.
You tried to, after she told you you're being fired?
Before that.
Before that, okay. And then you were escorted out of the building?
I was.
By Miss Leach. Did you tell Miss Leach, the former detective, that you just saw Dr. Rubin using cocaine?
No, I was shocked.
You were shocked, but you so you didn't tell him, you must have told him, or told her, sorry.
I didn't tell her.
Okay. And then after you were fired, it was, 30 days? Less than 30 days before you published your article?
Yeah, around that time.
And up until that time, you didn't tell a single soul, that you just saw Dr. Rubin using cocaine?
Besides the campaign manager, I didn't tell anybody else, no.
Besides the campaign manager, you told before you were told you were fired?
Yes.
And how many days before the election, before you finally decided to tell the world you saw Dr. Rubin using cocaine?
It was published the 1st of November, but I submitted it. I'm not in charge of publishing when and where.
So you published on what day?
It was published on the 1st of November.
And the election was when?
November 8th?
How many days is that?
7.
No further questions.
Thank you. Did you need a few moments to pick up your non-cocaine?
Yes.
We could it'd probably be easier to get it later. Mr. Risotto, when you're ready, you can conduct your cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Good afternoon, Miss Leach.
Good afternoon.
Let's start by talking about your relationship with the plaintiff.
Okay.
Before you worked for him, you were a detective in the narcotics unit.
Yes, that's correct, for the McGeorge Police Department.
Ma'am, you almost lost your life during that line of work.
That is correct. I had a severe medical episode and I was in cardiac arrest.
That's right, you got rushed to the hospital.
Yes.
And that's where you met the plaintiff.
Yes.
It was the plaintiff who saved your life.
That's true.
And you believe you owe the plaintiff your life.
I do, yes.
You would do anything for the plaintiff, wouldn't you?
I wouldn't say anything, no.
Well, I find it interesting you say that because when the plaintiff offered you a job, you took it.
I did, yes. I was ready to transition out of the police department.
Didn't even think twice about it.
No, I was ready to help support him.
Let's talk about your job on the plaintiff's campaign. You were his security guard.
Yes.
You also drove him around.
I did, yes.
And you were with him at all his campaign events.
Yes.
He didn't have just one campaign event, did he?
No, he had quite a few.
Not just 10.
No, more than that.
He had 50 campaign events.
That sounds right, yes.
And on top of that, he kept working part-time at the emergency room.
Yes, he did.
Sounds like a lot of work.
It was. It's really a testament to his work ethic.
Let's talk about how he was able to do all that work. Ma'am, you saw symptoms of cocaine use in the plaintiff, didn't you?
I saw a few symptoms, but I would not attribute them to cocaine use.
Well, let's talk about what you saw. You know the symptoms include excitability,
That's true, yes.
talkative habits,
Yes,
confidence boost,
absolutely.
and dilated pupils.
Yes, those are all symptoms.
Ma'am, he had to be excited at his campaign events, right?
Yes, he was very energetic throughout the whole time he was campaigning.
He was always talkative at those events,
Definitely, yes.
always confident.
Yes.
And you weren't constantly looking into his eyes to check if his pupils were dilated, were you?
No, I was not.
And you also wouldn't expect him to do cocaine at a campaign event, right?
Definitely not.
But you weren't with him all the time, right?
Not all the time, no.
That's right, you can't tell us what the plaintiff did when he was working part-time at the emergency room.
I could not tell you that, no.
Can't tell us what the plaintiff did when you weren't with him.
I'm not sure what he did when I wasn't there.
I want to talk now about the morning of October 10th. You remember bringing the plaintiff to his office that morning?
Yes, I do. As I recall, I picked him up around 7:45.
He seemed upset during the drive.
He was upset, yes.
Now, at that office, you actually have a desk of your own.
I do, yes, in the reception area.
From that desk, you can see the plaintiff's office door.
I could, yes.
That morning, you saw Taylor Bricker go into that office.
That's correct, yes.
A few seconds later, she came out.
Yes.
Man, when Taylor was in that office, you didn't see what happened, did you?
No, there was no way of seeing from where I was sitting.
You didn't hear what happened.
No, I didn't hear anything.
Sitting here in trial today, you can't tell the members of the jury what happened inside that office that morning.
I'm afraid I couldn't see, so I don't know for sure.
Thank you for your testimony. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you. And thank you both for competing. One more case to try after you, and so we'll have the results shortly before 4 p.m. and they'll be emailed and probably posted on Instagram as well.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right, call the matter of Rubin versus Bricker to order. So please state your appearances for the record.
Vinny Gill for the plaintiff.
Good afternoon.
Pradash Chandra for the defense.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Gill, I understand that you were going to start with an opening statement.
Yes.
Are you prepared to proceed?
Yes.
You may.
She felt wronged, she felt betrayed, and she sought revenge. Miss Bricker made a mistake that she regrets, a mistake that she apologized for and tried to reconcile. But the mistake was too great. She was fired. And she felt betrayed. She sought revenge. Today, we stand trial for the case of defamation. You will be presented with the facts and nothing less. It is up to you to come to the conclusion, after hearing those facts, that we have told you the truth and they have told you a story. During this trial, there are certain points that I will prove to you. Point number one, that Ms. Bricker made statements about Dr. Rubin to other people. Point number one, that Ms. Bricker made statements to people other than Dr. Rubin. Point number two, that those statements were about Dr. Rubin. Point number three, that those statements were meant to believe that Dr. Rubin was using cocaine. And point number four, that those statements were false. Dr. Rubin is an excellent man, a prominent doctor that spends his days serving those in the city of McGeorge. In fact, you will hear a testament to that from our witness, Mr. Jordan Leach, who is a veteran officer and detective of the McGeorge Police Department's narcotics unit, who, while on duty, came into contact with a substance known as fentanyl, which caused him to go under cardiac arrest. And it was the actions of Dr. Rubin that saved him that day. In April of 2021, Dr. Rubin announced his campaign for state senate. And he ran this campaign on a single issue of being anti-drug. That issue resonated with the people of McGeorge. In fact, he had a 5% lead above his opponent. Dr. Rubin was uniquely qualified to address the issue of the drug crisis to the state senate. He supported this campaign by attending close to 50 campaign and community events, all the while maintaining his position at his hospital. He hired Jordan Leach to be his personal security and even hired a spry young Pacifica College graduate to help him with this campaign. But then came October 8th. Ms. Bricker made a public tweet on the official account of Dr. Rubin. A tweet that by all accounts goes against the message that Dr. Rubin promotes. But that tweet was a mistake that she regrets. She tried to reconcile by deleting the tweet as soon as she noticed. But the mistake was too great. And Dr. Rubin did what any reasonable person in his position would do, which was to fire Ms. Bricker. She felt wronged, she felt betrayed, and she sought revenge. Ms. Bricker, not a week before the election, published an article in the McGeorge Times. An article that is viewed by many of the voters in the city. And what followed is disheartening to say the least. Mr. Rubin's campaign came to an end. What looked to be a bright and promising campaign turned for the worst. Mr. Rubin's reputation, his long-standing reputation of selfless service, has been stained by the article that Ms. Bricker published. And we're not here to rekindle his campaign efforts. We're here for the truth of what kind of man Dr. Rubin is. A man who selflessly serves his city. And when the facts come out, you will see the truth. And I hope that you return a verdict in favor of my client. Thank you.
Thank you. Defense have a witness. Yeah, your witness. Direct examination. Mr. Chandra.
Yes. Defense would like to call Taylor Bricker just then. Good morning.
Good morning.
Please introduce yourself to the jury.
Hello, my name is Taylor Bricker.
Is it okay if I call you Taylor?
Of course.
How do you know the plaintiff in this case?
I worked for the plaintiff as his communications coordinator.
Taylor, as his communications coordinator, what were some of your responsibilities?
I was responsible for drafting mailers for voters as well as managing the social media websites.
You mentioned managing the social media websites. What type of social media?
Like Twitter.
And whose Twitter was this?
Dr. Rubin's Twitter for his campaign.
Now, are you aware of any tweets that were made from this account on October 8th?
Yes. The tweet that I mistakenly made on Dr. Rubin's account.
Right. On October 8th, there was a tweet that went out that said, "I'd be dizzy, can't wait to get litty at the club tonight." Can you tell us more about this tweet?
Yeah, I was certain that I was publishing that on my actual private account, but I didn't realize until 2 hours later that it was actually on Dr. Rubin's Twitter account. But immediately once I realized, I deleted the tweet.
Did you tell anyone about this?
I felt really guilty, so I immediately texted the campaign manager, Jennifer.
And what was Jennifer's reaction to this?
She didn't reply until the next day, and she said that it was no big deal, tweet was deleted, and we'll have a meeting on Monday at 8:15 a.m. to prevent this from happening again.
I'd like to talk to you about that Monday morning now. What happened?
I got there early in preparation for my 8:15 meeting, and I decided to walk into Dr. Rubin's office for that meeting.
And what happened at this meeting?
I saw Dr. Rubin sitting at his desk with a dollar bill rolled up on his right hand and white powder on his desk. I immediately connected that to my personal experience with cocaine, and that's what I believed I saw.
Can you elaborate a little bit more as to why you thought this was cocaine?
Yes, I had a roommate in undergrad that was addicted to cocaine that we had to create a intervention session for her. It got really serious.
I'm so sorry, Taylor, that you had to see that morning. Did you tell anyone about this?
About what I saw?
About what you saw that morning, yes.
I was very shocked. I ran to my office, and once the manager came into my office, I tried to tell her, but she wouldn't listen.
And then what happened?
I got fired, and I was escorted out of the building.
Were you surprised at this reaction?
I was. It was completely 360 from her telling me that everything was okay, that it's no big deal, to her saying that I'm being fired because of this tweet. And she also accused me of doing drugs myself.
Taylor, why do you think you were fired?
I think I was fired because I saw the truth of Dr. Rubin behind closed doors, and they wanted to get rid of me for that.
So after your conversation with Jennifer, what happened then?
I decided to submit an article to the McGeorge Times.
Permission to approach the witness?
You may.
Exhibit. Permission to publish to the jury? Exhibit 1?
Sure.
Taylor, what is Exhibit 1 that I have just handed to you?
This is the article that I submitted to the McGeorge Times.
And is this a fair and accurate representation of that article?
It is.
Can you inform our jury members here what specifically you wrote about in this article?
Yeah, I wrote about how I was a member of a group I never wanted to be a part of, referring to watching a loved one close to me addicted to cocaine, and that I felt that all the voters needed to understand how I dedicated 1.5 years of my life to advocate for someone who was anti-drug and was actually doing drugs behind closed doors. I had to tell them the truth.
Now, in this article, you talk about a Dr. Rubin that's behind closed doors.
I do.
A Dr. Rubin who's sitting behind his mahogany desk with cocaine on the surface of his desk and a rolled up bill in his right hand. Is that what you saw that morning of October 10th?
That is what I saw.
No further questions.
Thank you. Cross-examination?
Good afternoon. Let's start with how you met Dr. Rubin.
Okay.
You applied for a position in his campaign, correct?
I did.
And that position was to be his communications coordinator, correct?
Yes.
And when you first started, you really enjoyed working there.
It was boring, but yes, I enjoyed working there.
And you stayed there for about 1.5 years.
I did.
So let's talk about October 8th.
Okay.
You made a specific tweet on that day, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
A tweet on the official account of Dr. Rubin.
Yes, it was an accident.
Dr. Rubin's campaign ran on a single issue of being anti-drug, correct?
That's true.
And the tweet that you made, I quote, said, "At Be Dizzy, can't wait to get litty tonight at the club. Love Tay. Is that a fair representation of what that tweet was?
That's correct.
Wouldn't the term Liddy, couldn't it be interpreted as to mean being extremely drunk and or high?
It could be.
And that tweet then goes against the message that Dr. Rubin promotes in his campaign.
That's true.
But you made a mistake.
Yes.
And that was the only mistake you made while working for Dr. Rubin.
Yes, that was the only mistake I've ever made.
And you worked hard for Dr. Rubin.
I really did.
Let's talk about what happened after that tweet. You were asked to come to the office that following Monday, correct?
I was.
And when you got to the office, you went directly into Dr. Rubin's office, correct?
I did.
And that is where and from what you can see, it was only you and Dr. Rubin in that office, correct?
That's true.
And that is where you claim that my client was using cocaine, correct?
Yes, he was.
But you've never heard of Dr. Rubin using cocaine before, have you?
No.
You never once thought of him as a cocaine user before, have you?
No, that's why I was so shocked.
Yet, you claim that you're the only one to see him using cocaine in this case, correct?
Yes.
There's no one else that can claim that Dr. Rubin has used cocaine.
No.
No one else saw it.
That day, no.
No one else can speak to it.
No.
And there's no video of it.
There was no video of it.
But you want us to take your word for it.
Yes.
And only your word.
Yes.
And your word is that on the very day that you knew you would be in trouble, you claimed to see my client using cocaine.
That's true.
But you only made one mistake.
Only one.
And the day you came back to the office, you were fired.
Yes, to my surprise.
And you felt betrayed after being fired.
I did.
And just 1 week before the election day, you published an op-ed in the McGeorge Times.
It was published on November 1st, yes.
Just 1 week before the election.
Yes.
No further questions.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Chandra,
Yes, Your Honor.
you may proceed when ready.
The truth behind closed doors. That's what this case was about today. In order to prove that Taylor committed defamation, the plaintiff's counsel had to prove that the statements made in those articles, in that article, was false. That was the only element that mattered in this case. The other three elements that counsel got up here and talked to you about, we concede. And in order to prove that those statements were false, plaintiff's counsel decided to bring Leach to offer testimony as to how great Dr. Rubin is. In fact, they got up here and mentioned that Dr. Rubin is a great man, that he saved Leach's life, and that he's so great that he's this pillar of society who people owe great respect to. But as we will learn, that was far from the truth. The truth that was hidden. The truth that when my client, Taylor, tried to expose, was shut out by Dr. Rubin and his acquaintances. We've heard testimony here today. You heard Taylor get up on the stand and testify that
That morning, when Taylor opened Dr. Rubin's office doors, behind the mahogany desk, on the surface of the desk, cocaine and a rolled up bill in his right hand. That is what Taylor saw that morning. And that is what was published in that McGeorge Times article. The McGeorge Times article was merely a means to an end of getting that truth out, regardless of whether it was published on November 1st or after. This case was not about some tweet. This case is not about someone getting fired. This case is not about revenge, as plaintiff's counsel have tried to put it out. This case is about one thing and one thing only, which is the truth. And with the testimony that Taylor has offered us today, we know what the truth is. Folks, let's get it right. There is no way that Dr. Rubin was rolling pasta dough at 8 o'clock in the morning on a Monday after a tweet had just damaged his political reputation. Let's not kid ourselves about that. You know what Dr. Rubin was doing that morning. Taylor knew what Dr. Rubin was doing that morning. And that is what was testified. And finally, we know, apart from Taylor, no one else saw this. Not even the witness the plaintiff's counsel has offered us today. So it's a matter of looking at who's the more biased witness here. Is it Taylor, who supposedly suffered great harm because of a mistake that she made, or is it the witness that plaintiff's counsel has offered today, who owes Dr. Rubin his life? I'm just saying, maybe there might be a little bit of bias there. Who knows? I'll let you guys be the judge of that. In the end, in my opinion, and based on the witness that was provided here today, it is clear that Dr. Rubin used cocaine, which is true, and that is what was published in the article in McGeorge Times. And with that, we have to find my client, Taylor Bricker, not liable for defamation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. So we're done. You are our last trial. We're going to deliberate now, and within an hour, publish the results via email and I'm guessing on Instagram as well. So thanks for coming out.
Thank you.
Thank you.